Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku was gifted a divine quirk from All Might. Here is short summary. Midoriya Izuku was quirkless, was gifted a quirk from All Might, went to UA, fought in a war, lived through the after and was supposed to die. Only he finds himself back in the past with a skewed moral code, PTSD, and an extreme desire to stop his friends from dying deaths. He is going to change the future, make some friends, maybe find a boyfriend, give some villains a reason to be better and stop some heroes. For better or for worse. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Izuku knows he's about to die. It's in the thick scent of smoke, in the way the ground shakes beneath his boots, in the blood staining his hands. Japan has become more than a battlefield, it's destroyed, reduced to nothing but rubble. Millions are dead, more will soon follow. Izuku is one of the last pro-heroes, surviving long into the after, even if his graduation was a year ago, held in a bunker with the last of his friends. They had lit candles, orange flame flickering across his freckles as he accepted Yamada's congratulations. None of them voiced how it felt more like a death sentence. They couldn't have been more right. Out of their group, 8 remain, but Izuku doesn't know if that's correct. It's been over an hour since he last saw them. He can only wonder how many have already fell to try and help him. Izuku swallows, holds Eri tighter in his grip. Her wire-thin arms clutch his neck, and she shakes but has yet to sob. Even in her fear, she is quiet. It makes the rage left lingering from overhaul worsen, but Izuku holds it in and holds her, keeps her pressed close as he stands alone in the dust and destruction that was once a shopping mall. Now it's but rubble, blood and bone and concrete slabs. Stand down, Izuku, All for One calls. His face has been restored thanks to Endeavor's fire. He has white hair and freckles. Familiar, so familiar it makes his stomach roll. He ignores it for the sake of his sanity. For the sake of the little girl in his arms. Hey, he speaks instead to Eri, terrified and silent in his hold. It's going to be okay, sunshine. She shakes, sniffles, still so quiet, it makes him want to find Overhaul's dead body and rip it apart. Hey, he repeats, just look at me, keep looking at me. Her red eyes are wide with fear. He smiles in All Might. He nearly chokes thinking about his dead mentor. Worthy smile before dropping it. He cannot save her, cannot save either of them. Izuku isn't a hero here. He's a boy holding a child, a girl he sees as a younger sister, standing on ground soaked with his friend's blood. He is not pro-hero Deku. He is Midoriya Izuku and he's about to die. The smile he gives her is smaller but 10 times more genuine. Eri, he says, quietly, hearing the heavy footfalls of All for One approaching. I'm so glad I met you. She nods, opens her mouth, and then closes it before burying her face in his neck. He shifts his grip, holds her impossibly tighter. Izuku, All for One calls again. I see you've decided to. Eri starts shaking. Izuku looks down at the head of white hair under his chin. Eri, he whispers. Eri, sunshine, take a deep breath. It's okay. We're going to be okay. Eri. There is no Aizawa to stop her quirk. There is only light, a light so bright it blinds Izuku as he crumples under the weight of his bones snapping and breaking as his body gets younger and younger and All for One shouts something. A different light collides with them. A quirk, he assumes, under the haze of sharp pain and brightness. The weight of Eri is ripped from his chest. He lashes out instinctively. He calls upon One for All. Lets it flood his veins, green lightning sparking across his skin. The smell of ozone fills the air. Rage and fear burn hot in his veins. Pain causes his vision to fill with dark spots. Something goes wrong. His body becomes weightless. He can smell the way the ozone changes, strong and thick, to sharp and dangerous. Almost like Kaminari's quirk before he released his electricity. Then his body slumps, knees collapsing under him, and he falls, hitting hard concrete. The pain, suffocating, sudden, jars him into opening his eyes. He's prepared to see All for One. prepared to see Eri curled up in his grip, prepared even for Shigaraki to be there, a goading smile to his haggard face. Instead, when he opens his eyes, he comes face to face with All Might. A younger All Might, an alive one, blue eyes and blonde hair and a chest that rises and falls evenly. Yagi Toshinori stands before him and says, clear as day, that Izuku needs to be realistic before leaving him on a roof. The roof. This is the day Izuku saves Katsuki from the sludge villain. This is the day All Might tells Izuku he can be a hero. This is the day everything changed. Izuku looks up, still in shock, still finding it hard to breathe, knees aching and mouth dry, and finds that Musudafu is not a desolate wasteland. He can hear cars and people and birds. He can see the clear blue sky, the clouds. He can feel the sun on his face and his body doesn't ache from age-old scars and chronic pain. Izuku looks down at his shaky hands and finds they're free from being marred by One for All, because he doesn't have Yagi's quirk yet. He hasn't accepted being his student yet. Izuku is 14 again. He promptly tilts his body to the side and throws up. When he stops shaking, he wipes his mouth and winces. He stands on shaky legs. No chronic pain. No aches and pain and scars, looks through his backpack and grabs his water bottle. He washes his mouth out, spitting out the leftover taste and then turns away. Away from his past, or is it his future? Away from the roof. Away from what he could become. He's 14 again. Before One for All. Before Yue. Before Shigaraki Tamura. Before All for One. Before death and destruction and bloodshed. He can find the villains before they join the League. He can hunt down Overhaul before Eri is traumatized further. He can get Todoroki out of his household, make sure Mineta never gets into the hero course, find Shinso and give him a good foster family. As he stumbles down the fire escape, he keeps his mind in this dissociative state. In the strange quiet of his mind, he ignores the loudness of everyday life, ignores the blue sky and his unharmed skin. It's safer, easier. If he truly realizes he's back, acknowledges that his friends and family are alive, he will shatter, and he can't do that. Not when Katsuki is currently being suffocated. When his feet hit solid ground, he freezes at the sights, smells, and sounds around him. Clear air and passers-by, cars and vans and trucks. So many people, so free and open with their lives. No fear, no oppressive force keeping them down. How many of these people die? How many run to different towns, to different cities, to different counties? How many stay and follow Shigaraki? Izuku stares at them and wills himself to move. Katsuki first. Breakdown later. Izuku takes a deep, shuddering breath. Katsuki needs him. He can't lose himself now. With that, he rummages in his bag for a pen and then takes off in a sprint, only to stumble to a few blocks down. His breath lodges in his throat. He pants, a stitch growing in his side. He's 14 again. He hasn't started his workout routine yet, nor is a literal war happening where he's fighting day and night. He rests against the side of a building not broken or burnt or destroyed, and isn't that baffling? Doesn't that make trying to get his breath back a little harder knowing what's coming has yet to happen, and hacks up a lung? His heart is pounding, and his palms are sweaty, and Izuku knows he's going to drop eventually. But Katsuki needs him. Katsuki first. Izuku draws in enough breath for him to straighten and lightly jogs to his destination. He's within a street, making out the crowd gathering. How long has it been since he saw crowds, when he hears the explosions? He's quicker this time around and he knows just what to do. He's thought about this moment for years, spun it round and round in his head when the nightmares of Katsuki dying younger than he did kept him awake. Izuku pushes through, makes eye contact with a panicked, red gaze and charges forward. When he's close enough, he swings his backpack, smashing it into the sludge villain's eye. It jerks back and Izuku doesn't waste any time. He ignores the shouts from the crowd, the angry yells of the pro-heroes who were watching a child suffocate, and digs his fingers into the sludge, keeping his hand tight around the pen. What the, Deku? Katsuki shouts, meaning he's able to breathe once again, and Izuku rolls his eyes, grabs the sludge's eyeball and yanks. Oh, it speaks. You again. Hi. Izuku chirps and holds the pen over the eyeball. The sludge's smile drops instantly. I'll stab if you don't let him go right now. Something must be in his voice or his eyes or maybe just his face because the sludge stills and Katsuki's eyes widen. Izuku slowly lowers the pen. Closer and closer and closer. The sludge makes the smart choice of pulling back and just in time for Death Arms to appear. Izuku hands over the sludge, tucking the pen up his sleeve. Then he turns to Katsuki, who's simply standing there, staring at him. Free from sludge. Free to breathe. Izuku drinks in the sight of him. Ashy blonde hair, crimson-red eyes, smooth skin. No blood staining his lips. No pierced heart or shattered rib cage. He's in front of him and alive. Alive. Izuku finds himself moving without thought. His hands, once used to rip a villain apart, that once held a building up, that have punched and torn, grip the sides of Katsuki's neck in a gentle hold. Katsuki is frozen beneath him, caught somewhere between confusion and an adrenaline crash, still reeling from the attack. Izuku can feel his own lungs protest after nearly drowning and then sprinting here. But he doesn't focus on that. He can't. There's a strong, steady pulse beneath his scarless fingers. What the air you doing, Deku? Katsuki spits but he's yet to explode him. There must be something in Izuku's eyes or maybe his facial expression. He has no idea what it is, but he can guess. Mourning, horror, relief, hope. I don't know, Kachan, Izuku whispers and pulls back. He can feel his eyes prick with tears. He's alive. He's alive. I'm sorry. For everything. Katsuki's eyes shudder. His brows furrow. Izuku steps back, grabs his bag and walks around the reporters and heroes demanding his attention. He doesn't stop when All Might jumps into view. He simply ignores him, keeps walking. Izuku can't have won for all this time. He doesn't deserve it, not when they lost regardless. He shattered his bones over and for what? They all died in the end. He couldn't save them when it mattered. He found some of their bodies. Others, they never found, not when Dabi or Shigaraki were involved. But Izuku had to watch his friends die, his teachers die, his mum die, and his Quirk did nothing. Not in the end. In the after, he was Deku. Not pro-hero Deku. Just Deku. Useless, worthless Deku. He can change things now. Do it without everyone's eyes on him. Do it without having to have his friends attached. He can do this alone. It will be safer. He won't have to find Katsuki's blooded, broken body. He won't have to feel guilty every time he looks at Aizawa-sensei. He won't have to watch Iida be paralyzed or Todoroki burn up or Asui stabbed or Uraraka crushed. Izuku got lucky the first time. He had friends and that was a miracle in of itself, but he doesn't have to lose them again. Not if they don't know him, not if they don't care. He'll have to do this alone. When he gets home, a home that was destroyed by Gigantomachia, his mum isn't home yet. The lights are off, but it smells like her perfume. She's alive, he tells himself to stop the bubbling panic. She's alive. Izuku barely has the door closed before he crumples, silent sobs racking his body. His body drops, pulled by gravity or something heavier, something like the weight of the world on skinny, not yet strong or scarred, shoulders. He collapses under the weight of expectation, of the knowledge of the future that now hangs in the balance, of the lasting memory of the many hasty burials of his friends. As he curls, fetal position, on wooden flooring, struggling to breathe through his cries, he remembers one of his English assignments. At the time, Yamada-sensei had only smiled when their class didn't understand what the text meant. Even Izuku was having trouble reasoning it. Name one hero who was happy. All Might was mentioned. Midnight seemed happy. Hawks, Mirko, Endeavor was happy the minute he reached number 1. But now, Izuku can only sniffle pathetically at his past self. At his future one. There is no such thing as a happy hero. They strive to be as happy as they can but, in the end, they're not. There is simply too much loss, too much pain and suffering they encounter. They all found that out quickly in the after. So curled up on his floor, he makes a deal with himself. He can't stop his friends being heroes. Some of them he could easily twist. Uraraka and her financial problems, Todoroki and hating his father, Iida's first response to pain being murder, but he won't. He wants them to have what he can't have. He wants them to be happy. He wants them to never know the horror and emptiness or war. He wants them to live. That means he needs to plan. He needs to find a way to fix the mistakes of the future and stop All for One from taking over. With him rejecting One for All, he assumes Sir Night-Eye will put Mirio's name forward, and if Izuku can stop Overhaul before he begins, then Mirio won't lose his quirk. So, Overhaul, then the League, then All for One. Oh, and the Doctor. As his mind starts to whir, his breathing steadies, his heart no longer feels like it's going to crack his ribs to escape the pressure. Only when he can take 5 calming breaths does he pick himself up off the wooden floor and stand. His knees are like jelly and this vision swims, but he's able to make his way to his room. Once again, he freezes at the sight. All Might's face decorates the floor to the ceiling. Izuku stares at his past, once dead, mentor and gets to work. He drops his bag by the door, goes to the bathroom and washes his face of the salty tears. He removes his uniform and redresses in a baggy shirt and shorts. Looking into the mirror of the bathroom, he's surprised by not only the lack of muscle, but the lack of scarring. He's all pale skin and freckles. Once he's studied his body, he goes back to his room and starts removing the posters from the wall, collects the figurines into a pile and changes his bedsheets into the soft blue set his mum kept. When finished, his room looks empty, barren. It reminds him of his room during the war, in the bunker. Only the essentials, his bed, a small sink, and a knife under his pillow. With that, he starts up his computer and fishes out a fresh notebook. Overhaul, the League, All for One, the Doctor, not to mention the Meta Liberation Army, the Hero Commission, Endeavor, Shinso's foster parents. The list goes on and on and on. So much to do, so little time. But he refuses to fail this time. He refuses to watch any of his friends and family die. He'll be the hero he couldn't be in the future. Chapter text. The boy is strange, off, different. When he first met the boy, he was full of hope and awe, something Toshinori loved to see in his fans, but the second time, the boy was wrong. He didn't look at Toshinori with awe anymore. He didn't even look at him. Even when Toshinori said he could be a hero. Even when he started to speak about his quirk. He just kept walking. There was no awe, no hope, no fight in his eyes. Just emptiness. A green abyss. More like looking out at the ocean than a field. Endless depths and no freedom. That look was a look he often saw in retired pros. A look he often saw on himself whenever he looked in a mirror. So Toshinori has no choice but to be here. He heads to the police station and one side glance has Detective Tsukauchi following him into an interrogation room. The man looks tired but not too dead on his feet. That means less caseloads today. He's only mildly ashamed to be giving him another one. Yes, Toshi, he says, and Toshinori rubs the back of his neck, trying not to cough up blood. I need you to find someone for me, he says, not making eye contact, and Tsukauchi blinks at him. Okay, he says slowly. Why, I may have done something stupid, he says, and Tsukauchi sighs, pinches the bridge of his nose. There's that tiredness Toshinori is used to. What now? The sludge villain, he says. I saved a boy that was drowning, and he was the one that saved that other boy, the explosion one. And, Tsukauchi asks, hands stuffing in his pockets, and Toshinori takes a second to pray. Then he says, I offered him my quirk. Tsukauchi stares at him. And stares. And stares. Toshinori says, choking slightly as his blood crawls up his throat. Naomasa. Did this boy accept it? He chokes out, and Toshinori drops his gaze. Tsukauchi straightens. Toshi, please tell me you know who he is. More silence. What the were you thinking? Tsukauchi snaps, and Toshinori is quick to defend himself. He can't hide the wince at his normally calm and level-headed friend resorting to cursing. He had hero potential. Where is he then? I do not know. Tsukauchi's eye starts to twitch. Do you at least have a name so we can check in and make sure he doesn't tell anyone? Toshinori is finding the police carpets fascinating today. He loves their design. Maybe they should consider matching the carpets to the curtains. I'm going to kill you, Tsukauchi breathes. Give me a description of this kid. Green hair, Plain, freckles and quirkless. He says, and Tsukauchi does a double take. There's a moment where he looks at Toshinori and simply sees him. He knows his story. He knows him as more than just number one pro hero All Might. He's quirkless. Tsukauchi asks, walking over to his computer and starting to type. Yes. He asked if a quirkless person could become a hero. Hand still on the keyboard. Toshinori is absolutely loving the carpets. And you told him you'd give him your quirk. Tsukauchi whispers, and his black eyes are burning. What were you thinking? He would be a fantastic Yagi Toshinori. Tsukauchi hisses and Toshinori freezes like a deer in headlights. I know you're not that stupid as to tell a quirkless boy he can't become a hero without All Might's quirk. The realization hits him like a punch. Oh, he whispers. We might have a suicide on our hands, you idiot. Tsukauchi spits, fingers typing quickly. Then he spins the screen to face Toshinori. Find him and I'll send an officer to check he's alive, he says, and Toshinori can only do as he's told. If later, Tsukauchi tells him to not approach the boy and let him exist without their interference, then he agrees, albeit hesitantly. Midoriya Izuku would make a perfect symbol of peace. Toshinori wants to see it. Midoriya Inko gets home at her usual time at 6 o'clock. She unlocks her front door, takes off her shoes and puts her fluffy slippers on, places her bag down and shouts, "Hey, honey, I'm home." The silence is deafening. She freezes, fear curling in her gut. Izuku is always home before her, is always waiting for her. Dread is like poisoning coiling up her throat, trying to suffocate her. Izuku, she calls again. Honey. There's shuffling and she turns to see his door open. He stands before her in baggy clothes, but he's alive and fine and she meets his eyes. Viridian and big and hollow. Empty. Blank. Something has happened. Izuku. She breathes and those big eyes fill with tears. His hands are shaking. It is her son, but it is not. Mum, he whispers, half stepping forward before recoiling. Mum. Izuku remembers All Might telling him about the building collapsing. He saved Izuku from identifying her body, but she's here now and she's alive. She's alive. Oh, baby. She steps closer, hands in front of her so he can see. What do you need? Mum, he whispers again, desperately, and then he's falling into her arms, curling around her and shuddering. But there is no sobbing, barely even a whimper. She holds him in their hallway, one hand gripping his shirt, the other petting his wild curls. Izuku doesn't cry quietly. He has the Midoriya gene of loud, constant cries. Yet here he stands, in her arms, shaking and tearful. Falling apart at the seams and pretending he's not. Something happened, she says, quietly into his shoulder, tightening her grip when he stills. I won't ask. I won't make you try and hide it. You won't believe me, he interrupts, and Inko laughs, quietly, subdued. Her son, but not. I know you, Izuku. She continues. It's your eyes. They're not. She would never tell him they're wrong. But they're different, not as bright, not as hopeful, as if the color has been washed away by heavy rain. She saw him this morning, bouncing as he got ready for school. So eager to learn, so eager to become a hero, so eager to prove the world wrong about him, about quirklessness. This is not the same boy. A day is too short for his eyes to be that withdrawn, that weathered. It reminds her of before Hisashi left, of the secrets he held beneath his own green eyes. He always had this aura about him, even at the start, a darkness, a heaviness, as if he was a soldier constantly returning from war. Izuku has his father's eyes now, the ones that look like they've survived the worst and refuse to back down. She pulls back, lets their foreheads rest against each other, meets those green eyes. You don't have to tell me, but I will believe you. She says, quietly, swear on All Might. It pulls an albeit shaky laugh from him, but a laugh, nonetheless. His eyes crinkle, his lips quirk upwards. This is more like her son. I can't tell you, he says, finally, and she smiles at him, a little dejected. Yeah. Okay. She agrees, easily, pulls away. What do you want for dinner? He blinks at her, thrown. That's it. But you said. Izu, you may be different, but you're still my son. If I can't help, Then I won't force you to do something you don't want to. She shrugs. I'm your mother and I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt that you won't tell me, but I know you. I know something's happened. Just promise me that you'll be safe. He looks close to those silent tears again. I'll try. She pats his cheek, gently, smiling when he nuzzles her hand. That's all I ask, baby. Now, dinner. Izuku adapts as much as he can. He goes to school, ignores those around him and stops calling Katsuki Kachan. The first time he used Bakugo, the whole class fell silent. Since then, his bullying has decreased rapidly. In fact, he's more prone to being stared at than attacked. Even Katsuki has resorted to non-stop eyeing him, as if he's a wild zoo animal escaped from a cage. Not that he cares. He has bigger things to deal with than angry children using him as a punching bag. His schedule and diet change. He takes up running, eats more protein, goes to Dagoba Beach and begins cleaning it like he did before. Only this time, there is no All Might watching him. Although occasionally there is a police officer, probably because he poses a security risk to All Might. He plans, finds locations and floor plans and names. Most nights his eyes grow weak from staring at his laptop screen so much. He creates a quirk analysis side business, MQA, set up through a forum on the internet, which earns him money and a name. Midoriya Izuku won't be a hero this time. He tried that, he failed. Midoriya Izuku watched the world end, he lived through the after, and he knows there is no big explosion, no dramatic screams. The world ends with a whimper. The world ends quietly, slowly, gradually, more a creeping descent than a collapsing cliff. The ground is already unsteady, has been since All for One first rose to power, but Izuku is digging his heels in. He has too much to lose and really not enough time to stop it all from happening. But Izuku isn't a quitter and he refuses to let his friends die. Not again, not in the horrific ways he witnessed. He starts with Gentle Criminal and La Brava, well, mostly La Brava. Finding her is easy enough, what with the context clues from their fight. Online, she offers to teach people how to use a computer. Izuku smiles at the advertisement and immediately emails her, asking for help. It takes less than 2 hours for her to respond and offer to meet up. That's how he finds himself in the local library. Hi, he greets, approaching the woman with the raspberry pink hair, tied up in 2 distinct pigtails. I'm Midoriya Izuku, I'm here to be taught. She stands, and holds out a hand. Iba Minami, it's nice to meet you. What do you want to learn? The basics, he admits, sitting across from her and then shuffles in his seat, looks down at the table. It's less about being quirkless and more what quirkless can do for him. In the right situations, of course. I'm quirkless. There's a pause. He holds his breath. Then, and his head snaps up, eyes wide. What? She smiles and he knows he's got her. And I would never attack you or humiliate you for being quirkless. You'll still teach me, of course. He lets his eyes water, thanks her profusely and admits, I want to learn how to hack because the kids at my school and my teachers hate me and my report my mum if she knows, how will I get into? In the end it's easy. But then again, Izuku knows her. He's fought her before. Most of the so-called villains he fought were people down on their luck, or pushed out by society, or attacked for their quirk. He knows them and he knows that whilst some villains would probably still shun him, most know what being an outsider means. So, every Tuesday and Thursday, he meets with La Brava and learns how to hack. He pays her through his quirk analysis, which she helps him code to make it so that the security is top-notch and that he can keep his anonymity. The forum originally started small, a Twitter account turned forum when people realized he was legit and good at his job. Sometimes he asks for money. Other times, if a person's quirk is useful, he asks for favors. Within a month, he's known as Moros. He couldn't go by Deku. He isn't a hero anymore. But the personification of doom, of foretelling deaths seems to fit too well. Once he's capable of what he needs to do, he continues his plan. Overhaul, the League, the Meta Liberation Army and All for One are the main points. Finding Overhaul is easy. Izuku was on the raid, he knows who is involved, the quirks, his way around. But he doesn't have a quirk, and he's going against Yakuza, who will kill him as easily as breathing. But Izuku refuses to let Eri be hurt more than she needs to, and Sir Night-Eye refuses to act without concrete evidence. Even if Izuku were to hand over what he knows, he doubts he'd be believed. He is 14 and quirkless. In other words, he is nothing. So Izuku changes tactics. He focuses on building his body up to a higher standard and on making gear. He doesn't have Hatsume to work with, and he refuses to use her inventions in fear of the repercussions if he is caught. If he's caught with her gear, she'll go down with him. At least, on the off chance he's captured, he can either use the quirkless card or he can ask for Detective Tsukauchi. His lie detector quirk should help when it comes to speaking about reasons why he's doing this. You all die in the after, and hopefully not get him sent to a psychiatric asylum. Izuku trains, and when he can't sleep knowing she's out there, alone and scared, he grabs his gear and goes out. Tight-fitting trousers lined with a material he helped Hatsume make, something like Kevlar but thinner, along with an Under Armour vest also with the stab and bulletproof design, and a jacket atop, which has multiple compartments for knives, gas bombs and even a bolus. A hood covers his hair and a gas mask over his mouth. The goggles, reminiscent of Aizawa's, hide his eyes and have a built-in heat monitoring and night vision element. Izuku knows he has two options. Knock the Shihasaikai members out and call for a hero. Or could make the whole ordeal permanent. He sits atop a rooftop and watches. He watches for a whole week before acting. Chisaki Kai likes to have a late morning walk, to clear his head, to breathe in the fresh air. He circles the block, always alone, for about an hour before returning. He doesn't frequent bars or nightclubs. In fact, his daily walk is the only time he ever leaves the compound. Izuku picks his moment, halfway through Chisaki's daily walk, and acts. In a park, he stumbles into Chisaki and flinches back. "Sorry," he says, ducking his head. All boyish charm and naivety. Chisaki steps away, pulling at his gloves. He looks like Izuku remembers. Brown hair and gold eyes. Pale and slim, with his bird's beak mask covering the lower half of his face. He's even wearing his green bomber jacket with a purple fur-lined hood. Chisaki shrugs. "It's fine." He goes to step away, and that's when Izuku nods. "Sorry again," he repeats, steps slightly in front of him and then points to his red shoes. Primordial brand. Quirkless identifiers. They're new and annoying. "Sorry." He keeps his head ducked, turns as if to leave when Chisaki calmly says, "Wait. You're quirkless." Izuku struggles to keep the smirk off his face. "Got you." He shrugs, eyes down, shoulders drawn up to his ears. "Sorry, all sorry." He keeps the panic in his voice, keeps the fear there. "Wait, it's okay," Chisaki says, voice dropping into something Izuku assumes he uses on Eri. It makes him want to vomit. "I always wanted to be quirkless." At that, Izuku follows the script. He freezes, darts his eyes up, big green eyes filled with awe. "Really?" he whispers, and Chisaki nods, tilts his head. "Quirks are a sickness," he says, as devoted as ever. You can be a cure." Izuku's eyes widen. He takes a small, hesitant step forward. You think?" Chisaki mirrors him, stepping forward, and Izuku knows he's got him. He dutifully follows Chisaki back to the compound. He allows his blood to be taken, has a short bathroom break where he opens a window by a slither, and then walks out, promising to be back. It's not even a lie. The following day, in the early morning, he slips into the compound through the open bathroom window and starts hunting. On light feet, he stalks forward to the main control room and plugs in a flash drive before heading towards the residential wing. None of them have locks on their doors. Slipping inside the first room, he decides to leave a message. A message so they all know he's coming for them next. There are 8 precepts to get through, and he needs to be out before 5 a.m., as that's when the first guards show up for their shifts. Izuku has time to work with, but he wants to prioritize Eri as much as possible. Scrapping by isn't going to cut it. This needs to be precise. So Izuku enters their bedrooms. He'll always be surprised with how easily villains can sleep. Heroes are plagued with their jobs, the atrocities they witness, and yet villains are simply restful, and takes a knife from his wrist holster. Accessible. Quick. He takes his knife and cuts and stabs. One slash across a throat or one stab straight to the heart. He has no empathy for these men but knows watching them die will probably induce a panic attack when Eri is safe. These are horrific people. They hurt and kill and torture children. That's why Izuku is doing this. He's met many villains and killing them is always the last option. But they hurt a child. An innocent, scared, defenseless child. Izuku thinks child abusers are some of the lowest of the low. He slips from room to room. One slash. One stab. Quick. Efficient. He can hear Shigaraki call them alike in their cold-bloodedness. He shakes it off. Heads into another room. Chronostasis room is close to Chisaki's and Izuku slits his throat, and is quick to leave. The best is left till last. Chisaki Kai sleeps peacefully, eyes closed, unaware of the bloodshed occurring in his compound. Izuku cuts his throat, shallow enough to draw blood, not to kill, but to keep him compliant, and then slashes the tendons in his wrists. He cuts through sinew and muscle, watches his eyes widen, mouth gaping in a silent scream and then stabs him. He watches him struggle to breathe, choking on his own blood. Only when he's dead does he whisper into the silence, "I told you I'd be back, asshole." Next stop. The medical wing. He finds his own blood samples, and Aries and grabs them, placing them into one of his many pouches on his utility belt. He doesn't want to leave his DNA or allow the heroes to find Aries. He doubts they would hurt her but he has to be sure. Then he heads to Aries' room. It's large and open and very white, very clinical. The moment the door opens, she's hiding under her bed, shaking but quiet. Oh, so quiet, it breaks his heart. "Hey," he says, quietly. "I'm Moros. I'm here to get you out." The silence hurts more than any wound a villain could inflict. He slowly sinks to the floor, crossing his legs. He removes his goggles, lets them hang around his neck and then drops his hands to his knees. "Do you want to come with me?" he asks, keeping his voice as quiet as possible. "I can take you somewhere safe." "Why?" a soft voice replies. "What about?" Izuku tilts his head. "He's gone," he says. "They all are. No one is ever going to hurt you again. I promise." He remembers his mum's words to him and says, "Swear on all might." Some movement. He doesn't dare twitch. "You promise?" Eri asks, and if he hadn't already murdered Overhaul and his lackeys, he would be going back to finish the job. "I promise," he repeats. "All I need to do is collect a flash drive and then I'm going to take you to some people I trust with my life. They're going to take good care of you." "How do you know?" she asks, so scared, so hopeful. "I'll tell you a secret, yeah," he whispers and she shuffles closer, still mostly hidden by the bed. "I can see the future," he tells her. "And these people I know are heroes and they're going to protect you and look after you. One of them, Eraserhead, can help with your quirk. Which isn't a curse, by the way. It's really cool." Silence. He waits. 5 minutes later, she's crawling out. Big, red eyes and pale, white hair. Only one bandage on her left arm that covers a thin section of skin, nothing like the bandages he remembers. He smiles, even if she can't see it. "Hi," he says. "I'm Moros." "I'm Eri," she says. Are you a hero?" He shakes his head. "I want to be but I'm better working in the middle." It's a little too honest, maybe even confusing for her to understand but she doesn't seem confused. She simply walks towards him and then pauses. "Green meets red. Ready to go?" he asks and she nods. "Anything you want to take?" She shakes her head. "Can I pick you up?" A nod. He gently lifts her into his arms and nearly cries when she clings to him. It reminds him of when he met her before, of doing everything he could to get back to her. With one hand, he secures the goggles back on his face, heads to grab his flash drive and then gives the computers a virus before heading out. He walks 2 streets over and hides in the shadows so he can contact Hina from MQA with one hand on his burner. She has a very cool teleportation quirk and a sister that needed his help. Within seconds, she appears, in a dark hoodie and sweatpants. She doesn't ask but her black eyes soften when looking at Eri. She simply waits for him to rattle off the apartment block and then holds out an arm. He takes it and feels a strange pulling sensation in his gut. Between blinks he's on the apartment block rooftop and not standing in an alley. That all? She asks and he nods. Favor complete. Thank you. She shoots him a flash of a smile and then is gone when he blinks again. As Izuku picks the lock on the roof entrance he says, "These heroes are going to ask about me, okay? And you can tell them the truth. You can tell them I found you, and that my name is Moros. You can trust them, okay, Eri?" She nods against his neck. "Okay, Moros, I'm proud of you," he says, into her hair. He holds her a moment longer. She won't know him as Deku, as the hero that saved her. They won't get to know each other in this timeline. And that's okay. She's only got a single bandage on her arm. She's yet to undergo the severity of Overhaul's fantastical ideas. She will be safer, happier like this. That's all he wants, even if that means she won't know him as a big brother. Even if that means she won't know him at all. Why? She asks, softly. "I just am," he replies and then starts heading towards Aizawa's apartment. Not that Aizawa ever told them where he lived. It was more of a necessity during the war, when he lost an eye and a leg. They all wanted a place away from UA to check up on each other. That became Aizawa's flat. It's how they found out about him and Yamada. It's how Izuku become a few thousand yen richer. Standing before the hero's door, he places Eri down and says, "Goodbye, Eri. Remember to tell them the truth, okay? Wait for them to show up." She nods and he knocks on the door and then books it down the hallway. Through the windowpane in the closed door, he watches as the door opens, as Eri starts speaking to someone. Izuku is on the roof, jumping to another and then down onto the ground before he can really think. He curls around a dumpster, ducks, waits, and when there's no familiar sight of a capture weapon, he goes back home and promptly has a panic attack. This isn't the first time he's killed. This isn't even the first time he hasn't killed in self-defense. But this is the first time he killed someone, multiple persons, who didn't fight back. These are his coldest kills. It makes him feel like a villain. He doesn't know how many times he washes his hands over and over and over again, seeing red staining his unscarred hands that is not truly there. Time passes and his skin becomes raw and then he collapses onto his bed and passes out. Chapter text. Shota is a very tired, very busy man. When he fought his way to UA and then through the sports festival to get his spot in the hero course, he never would have guessed how exhausting hero work is. His homeroom teacher had told him to be prepared for the long days and even longer nights. He shrugged it off at the time. He couldn't sleep well as it was because of his quirk, so a few sleepless nights because of hero work seemed easy enough. But Nedzu never could have prepared him for the horrors he would see as an under. The nightmares, the dead bodies and terrified children, the suicide victims, the villains that had nothing to lose. But in hell is it exhausting. That's why, as joke gag gift for their second wedding anniversary, Hizashi bought him a yellow sleeping bag. At the time, he had stared at his beloved husband and contemplated a very quick divorce, but he now treasures that sleeping bag with a passion. It's soft, secure, and his favorite color. The same color as his husband's beautiful hair. Shota loves sleep. Sleep just doesn't love him. Or like him very much. In fact, he's pretty sure sleep hates him. He knows it's partly his quirk. Mental quirks have been known to cause headaches, fatigue, and insomnia, and partly the nightmares, but Shota cannot sleep a full 6 hours, let alone 10. He naps and then he works, and if he's had a particularly rough patrol, he'll curl around Hizashi and lay there in total darkness until he either passes out or the sun comes up. Which is how he finds himself in bed, laptop on his lap above the duvet, Hizashi sleeping peacefully next to him, conveniently snuggled under the duvet in 2 blankets. He's been investigating a recent informant/analyst in the underground. They're extremely smart and their name is starting to become well known. It's yet to be decided if they're a threat. Information is deadly in the wrong hands, and if the person decides to analyze heroes' weaknesses and sell them, it's over. They'll be labeled an S-class villain in seconds and every hero will be sent after them, but every underground hero is being watchful. After all, having information about the underground is one thing. Willingly sharing accurate information is worth a lot of money and respect. Shota wants to meet them. He's contacted them online, but so far, No response. He knows other unders have tried and failed. Time will tell. He has patience. And when Shota says he wants to meet them, he doesn't expect a child at his doorstep. He doesn't expect to find out this child has been rescued from a Yakuza base, a child that not even Sir Night-Eye, the hero on the Shihasaikai case, knew about. He doesn't expect the vigilante he's been trying to contact, Moros, according to the child, to know about the child, to rescue her, and then know his address to drop her off. It's 4 in the morning and Shota stands in the local police precinct, sipping lukewarm, shitty coffee with one hand and holding the child, Eri, with the other. Detective Tsukauchi and Sir Night-Eye both decided, when seeing Shota show up with Eri, to follow through and head over to the compound with a group of heroes while Shota plays babysitter. He definitely doesn't expect them to return with wide eyes and pale faces. Tsukauchi's hat is off, and his dark eyes are bleeding confusion, his dark hair wet with the rain. Sir Night-Eye, Sasaki Mirai, doesn't look much better even if he's trying to hide it. His fingers fiddle with his glasses as he paces, then smooth down his green hair, then return to his glasses. What? He asks, gruffly, and Tsukauchi looks to Eri. Understanding immediately, Shota passes her over to Hizashi and they step into the adjoining conference room. They're dead, Tsukauchi says, quietly. All of them but one. A single slit throat, a stab wound to the heart. Only Chisaki Kai, known as Overhaul, had a different MO. Which was a shallow cut to the throat, the tendons in his wrists slashed, and then a stab wound to the chest area, Sasaki tells him. Overkill. Compared to the others, which were quick and efficient, this was more sadistic, more personal. Who survived? He asks. Kurono Hari, also known as Chronostasis, is currently in critical care. His quirk was able to slow the bleeding enough for him to still be alive. Tsukauchi says. Shota runs a hand through his hair. This really is a shitshow. So, the vigilante, villain, Sasaki interrupts. He's killed people. He's a villain now. Moros found out about Eri when even you two didn't know, nearly kills all of the members of the Yakuza and then drops her off at my door. Shota sums up, sipping his coffee. What the? Do you know why he dropped her at your household specifically? Tsukauchi asks, looking through the windowpane to where Eri sits huddled in Hizashi's lap. Shota sighs, then opens the door and heads over to Hizashi and Eri. He can hear the men follow him in. Red eyes track his movements fearfully. Dropping to a crouch in front of her, he asks, bluntly, can I tell them what you told me? Or do you want to tell them? About Moros, she asks, tiny hands gripping Hizashi's shirt as the other men hover. He nods, gives her a small smile, and is baffled when she doesn't flinch like his class does. About Moros, he confirms. He was nice, she says, quietly. He said he can see the future and that the heroes he was giving me to would look after me and protect me. He said Eraserhead can help with my quirk and that, she sniffles. He said it wasn't a curse. No quirk is a curse, Eri, Hizashi says, gently, running his hand through her white hair. Shota can admit, ignoring everything else going on, that his husband would be an amazing dad. What is your quirk, if you don't mind me asking? Tsukauchi asks and Eri clutches Hizashi tighter. It's okay, Shota tells her. No one here is going to hurt you. That's what he said, she whispers and then holds out her bandaged arm. That's what he did anyway. Are you talking about Chisaki Kai? Sasaki asks with the softness of two trucks colliding. She sniffles, ducks her head into Hizashi's chest and nods. Her shoulders are shaking and Shota can only meet Hizashi's eyes, both of their hearts breaking. I promise that no one is going to hurt you, Eri. Shota says, knowing to never promise anything unless he could follow through. Not for your quirk, they'll have to get through me. And me, little listener, Hizashi whispers into her hair. It's quiet for a long moment before she says, voice muffled by Hizashi's shirt, I made daddy disappear. Disappear, Sasaki repeats and she nods. I touched him and he. Hey, it's okay, Hizashi speaks over her tiny whimpers, holding her tighter. He begins to rock her back and forth, dropping his voice into a low hum that has even Shota's eyes drooping. He rises from his crouch and approaches the men at his back. Sasaki is fiddling with his glasses once again while Tsukauchi looks baffled. A teleportation quirk, he wonders aloud, and Shota shakes his head, downing the rest of the shitty coffee. If she transported him, he would have come back. And she said it was a curse, Sasaki adds. This case, the whole reason we were looking into the Shihasaikai was because we heard rumors of a counter to the drug, trigger, in the form of bullets. It was supposed to act like your quirk, eraser, but more permanent. Something flashes across Tsukauchi's face and he slowly approaches Hisashi, dropping into a crouch before Eri, much like Shota did seconds earlier. Hi, he says to her when she peeks away from Hisashi's chest, which is honestly the cutest thing Shota has ever seen. I'm Detective Tsukauchi and I want to help you, Eri. You said your dad disappeared, right? He asks and she nods. Did he disappear straight away? She pauses, shakes her head. Did he get smaller and then disappear? She nods. He smiles at her, says, thank you, Eri. That's very helpful. He stands up and meets their eyes. Shota raises his eyebrows. What? Tsukauchi starts ticking off his fingers. Quirk canceling bullets. A child with a bandaged arm. Chisaki's quirk can disassemble and reassemble matter. Eri's quirk made her dad disappear. Shota blinks and then it hits him at the same time. Hisashi's arms tighten around Eri and Sasaki freezes. She rewound him, Sasaki breathes. And Chisaki was using her DNA to create the bullets because she could rewind the quirks. They all look to Eri, who is looking back at them with obvious fear. And that's when another point hits Shota. Oh, he whispers and turns to Tsukauchi. That's why Moros did what he did. He knew they were hurting her. Oh no, Sasaki groans. A villain with a moral code. Izuku walks up for the school the next morning and rubs the sleep from his eyes. He feels raw, vulnerable, his chest hurts. Murdering people always leaves him shaky, even if he did kill bad people. As he steps out and grabs his bag, downing the coffee his mum has left for him, he sees her watching the news. He barely skims over it. Something about a new villain. Something about mass murder. He makes a mental note to be cautious when he checks on his group of informants later and maybe send some links over on how to be safe on the streets. Bye, Mum, he says, leaning over to kiss her cheek before running out of the door. In nightmares of flames and mirrors depicting a body that is not his, Dabi sometimes dreams of being Tuya. With red hair and Todoroki blue eyes, he stands in his old living room, holding a bundle of baby. Sometimes it's Natsuo, with chubby fingers and a boisterous laugh. Sometimes it's Shoto, with soft tufts of hair and big eyes. Sometimes it's Fuyumi, and they're dancing together under the cherry trees. Tuya never held Fuyumi as a baby because Tuya was a baby when Fuyumi was born. Tuya used to think they were twins because of how close they were, not only in age but appearance. Fuyumi's bright smiles and Tuya's happy laughs. Dabi looks back on those memories and wonders why he couldn't have kept them like that. Untouched, clean, unspoiled. Dabi dreams of Tuya and spends the next day in a foul mood. Tuya was a terrified little boy before he died. Always scared, always so upset, always a punching bag. Dabi isn't a boy anymore, nor is he scared. He's a man whose fear burned into anger. If he could go back to 13 and burn his old man there and then, he would. It would make life so much easier. But he can't, he's not strong enough, and the minute he kills Endeavor, is the minute every hero tries to hunt him down. It's not that he's afraid of prison or death. Not when he's been a dead man walking for a very long time. Dabi's fear is that of Tuya's. No one will see Endeavor's death as justified. The countless years of abuse, of neglect, of terrified children and a broken mother will be seen as nothing but expected. Just a hero father teaching his son to be the next best hero. Tuya tried to tell people, tell heroes, tell the sidekicks at Endeavor's agency. He sobbed and he wailed and he begged. No one cared. No one even bothered to listen. Dabi refuses to be backed into a corner like that again. So he stays on the streets and waits for a group powerful enough for him to join so that he can sneak on over to the Todoroki household, his household, and burn his father alive. Well, that was the plan. The plan until a short person dressed in all black, a gas mask and goggles drops in front of him in an alleyway and says, I have enough evidence to put Endeavor away for life, but I really need you to stop burning people to death. Izuku looks at Dabi and remembers the way he wouldn't stop getting up, body covered in burns, blue flames surrounded him like he was a demon from hell. The sight was permanently etched into his retinas afterwards. He remembers the way Shoto burnt up, the agony in his eyes, the half-scream as he succumbed to ash and dust, next to the body of Endeavor, still smoking. He remembers finding the rest of the Todoroki watching the news in silence. Faces blank and tears long dried on their cheeks. Rei couldn't handle it, and her last 2 children soon followed in her footsteps. For the rest of his time in the after, Izuku would be plagued with nightmares of Shoto calling out for him as his body burnt away. Dabi pauses, hand immediately flaming up, but the person, it sounds like a boy, moves, kicking at his hand and then flipping him over their shoulder. Dabi's entire body tumbles into the ground, breath punched from his lungs, staples creaking, skin pulling. He groans, blinking the stars from his eyes, and finds the person perched on his chest, holding his wrists down. Can we not do this? The person asks, and yes, that's definitely a teenage boy. Talk to me like the 20-something you are. Who the air you? Dabi hisses. Moros, nice to meet you. The person, Moros, replies. Now, Endeavor, thoughts. I'm going to ask the rest of the Todorokis, or try to, before I reveal too much to the media. I really don't want them to be upset, you know. Dabi has no idea what is going on. I'm not a Todoroki, dipshit, he wheezes, and the boy, despite the goggles, seems to be staring into his soul, unimpressed. And I'm not currently sitting on you. Dabi glares. I'm Ing. Dabi. Fire Quirk, known simply as cremation, hence the name. 20-something with multiple kills, and yet, everyone you've burnt has quite an impressive rap sheet. Moros rattles off and then tilts their head. Or, would you like me to use your real name? Bullshit, he says, calling Moros bluff. Not bullshit, Chuya, Moros replies, and Dabi freezes and then pushes with everything he has. He hasn't lived under Endeavor's roof and lived this long on the streets without being somewhat able to hold his own. He pushes and jolts the person enough to twist his body and slam them down beneath him. One hand he keeps near their neck, a low burning in his palm, the other he holds above them, glowing with blue flame. Izuku sees the flames and wonders if this is what Shoto saw in his last moments. He wonders if he was this calm about it. You know, Moros says, calmly. You're looking a lot like your dad right now. Dabi recoils like he's been hit. The flames immediately die and his hands have started to shake. He scrambles away, eyes wide and panicked. Moros slowly sits up. Around the person's neck, the gear has started to melt and the skin underneath has started to redden, like a bad sunburn. Neither of them move, but something must have flashed across his face because Moro's head tilts again into something resembling contemplation. Dabi glares, but he can't summon the safety of his anger back. Not when he's been described as his father. I'm not him, he feels compelled to say. Moros just looks at him. Dabi doesn't abuse kids, and if he had a partner, he'd never raise a hand to them. Yet he's still willing to hunt down his brother. He's still willing to hurt him. His revenge for his lack of a childhood means he's willing to do whatever it takes to feel something again. He thinks of mother's tears, thinks of placing himself between Fuyumi and father, thinks of holding Natsuo to stop him crying over a burn when his quirkless diagnosis arrived. He thinks of a little baby with big, mismatched eyes, holding his finger and babbling, thinks of a toddler sobbing as he's dragged into the training room Chuya despised and feared in equal measures. I'm going to stop him, Moros says, quietly. I won't let him hurt any of you again if I can help it. I have enough to put him away, but like I said, I need you to know I'm doing it. Why? Dabi asks, feeling the urge to run. Why help you them? Moros shrugs, stands, dusts himself off. Because you deserve to be helped. I'm a murderer. Dabi points out. So am I, Moros replies, so calm, so easy. It makes Dabi tense, the urge to flee rising. But your siblings aren't, and Rei-san has been due to be released for years. He fishes something out of his utility belt and holds it out to Dabi. With hesitant fingers, Dabi grabs the piece of card and finds a number scrawled on it in god-awful chicken scratch. I don't know when you meet Toga. Dabi tenses, remembering the girl with the blonde buns he met at the shelter. Or if you have already, but tell her to call me about her quirk. I can get her the blood she needs. Dabi stares and asks, will you tell them about me? Moros shakes his head, not if you don't want me to. I'll just explain how suspicious your death is. Is that okay? Dabi nods. Moros nods back. Why do all this? Dabi asks, desperately, and Moros shrugs. I want to help, he says, simply, and then climbs up the wall like a ing spider and disappears from sight, leaving Dabi on the ground, holding his business card. Oh, he shouts down a second later. You need to re-dye your roots. Slowly, Dabi drags himself up, prodding at his staples and staring at the card before pocketing it. He'll see if Moros is telling the truth before he involves Toga. Chapter text. Izuku sits outside the Todoroki household for a few days, watching, waiting. Finding Dabi was easier than breaking in here because, at the end of the day, Dabi could only kill Izuku, whereas Endeavor could kill him or arrest him for trespassing. That would really put a dampener on his plans. So, he waits, and he watches, and he checks in with his little network, steadily growing by the day, all while ignoring the many requests from underground heroes and the startling amount of messages from Jiren. If he'd known the man would be this pushy, he would have handled him sooner. But with the many issues he's trying to fix, Shigaraki and All for One are some of the last ones simply because of how powerful they are. Jiren is low down on his shit list. Either way, he's annoying. Almost as annoying as the Unders. They've tried to hack him, but La Brava is more than just helpful. Before the rescue, knowing he was going to look over the information he would receive from the Shihasaikai servers, she provided him with a secure laptop. He's pretty sure she knows he's not just changing the exam results he gets. But she hasn't asked, so he doesn't told her anything. The information from the rescue has been fruitful. Multiple crime organization links, names, locations, information about trade points. Izuku has started to leak some of it. First to Tsukauchi, simply because he likes and respects the detective. He kept All Might's secret and is a detective who quirkless people can trust. Izuku makes sure to keep up to date with that side of things. Quirkless discrimination is rampant and Izuku is in a forum dedicated to quirkless protection. It keeps everyone informed of heroes they can't trust, which is a surprising amount, MST due to unconscious bias that the quirkless are less than human, but some due to thinking quirkless are weak, little babies that should stay at home to avoid getting hurt altogether, and organizations that want nothing more than to experiment, enslave or murder quirkless individuals. Once again, that figure is a surprisingly high amount. The whole reason Izuku knew Aizawa before being in his class was because Unders are normally trusted by the quirkless. They, unlike the flamboyant and media-catching presence of the Daylighters, don't need to pretend for a camera or worry about their reputation. Unders are there to help. And they do. Eraserhead is well known by the quirkless community because of an incident he was in where he saved 14 quirkless people from a trafficking ring. When the Daylighters turned away the minute they heard the quirkless term, Eraserhead didn't falter. Izuku knows he can trust Tsukauchi, because he never let him down in the future, in the short time he survived the after. Then, 4 days later, he hands over that same information to the media. It's been 3 weeks since Eri's rescue and the police have learned to take his information seriously. They've stopped a drug cartel and a human trafficking ring, not to mention a serial killer because of Izuku's help. He wonders, as he watches the early morning sun come up and Todoroki Fuyumi leave the household for her job, if telling them about Stain would help catch him quicker. He thinks they might listen, but he doesn't want to tell the media about Stain. If he can get to him quickly, quietly, fewer people will follow in his ideals. Not that he's wrong. Midoriya Izuku loved heroes, All Might especially. They offered him hope, a reason to fight the oppressive society stacked against him for simply being quirkless. Pro-hero Deku fought side by side with heroes, fighting a war as a child soldier with his favorite hero's quirk in his veins. Moros has learnt that not all heroes are good and not all villains are bad. There are two sides to every coin, and he much prefers to work in the gray. In the after, Seeing his friends die in horrific ways, seeing what was left after All Might retired, seeing how society treated quirkless people, villainous quirk people, the poor and the sick and the desperate, Izuku lost his respect for the government, for the Hero Commission. Millions died, millions were injured and millions turned to Shigaraki as their savior. In the after, there was only survival. Izuku refuses to let that happen a second time. Endeavor storms from his house, slamming the door behind him before lighting up in flames and flying off. Izuku watches and checks Todoroki Natsuo's social media account, finding a tweet from his dormitory at medical school. Jumping lightly across the rooftops, he drops a little way away and stalks forward, heading straight for the front door. Endeavor won't bother with checking his security cameras, nor is he the type of man to look his front door. Too cocky, too self-assured. As expected, the door opens. No lock. Izuku slips inside and heads for Endeavor's office, remembering the first and last time Todoroki Shoto ever allowed him inside. He needed to pick up a few items before heading to the dorms and Izuku had scanned the interior with a keen eye. Once in his office, Izuku fires up his computer, places a flash drive in and allows the pre-prepared program to run. He waits, listening for any movement, knowing he might have to run if Todoroki turns him down. He's not the Todoroki Izuku knows. This is a younger, angrier version. This is Todoroki, the stranger and not Shoto, his friend, and when he's downloaded everything, he pockets the drive and heads to Todoroki's room. He's quiet, slightly afraid. What if Todoroki encases him in ice? Izuku is prepared for a few outcomes, but he still hates the idea of hurting his former friend. But this must be done. Izuku would never intentionally hurt his friend. He can't, knowingly, release information if Todoroki doesn't want him to. Dabi is apathetic, distrustful. He has learned to survive by himself and he did so in the future, only using the league for his own goals. Izuku won't mention him being Todoroki to you because Dabi doesn't want him to, because he wants Dabi to trust him. If he does, he'll hopefully listen when Izuku tells him to go back home. He'll give Todoroki Shoto the same courtesy if need be. Pausing outside of Todoroki's door, Izuku steels himself. He knocks. Waits. What, old man? Todoroki questions and Izuku nearly collapses at the sound of his voice. Todoroki Shoto at the sports festival, filled with rage at his father. Todoroki dropping everything to help Izuku when he pinged his location during the Stain fight. Todoroki-kun helping him save Katsuki. Shoto fighting side by side with him, screaming as Dabi burns him to death. The door swings open. Izuku has taken too long. Red and white hair, a blue and a gray eye. Sharp features but soft, like the ice he wields. Heat pouring from him that's reminiscent of the nights they huddled together when hiding from Shigaraki and his troops. Todoroki Shoto stands in front of him. Alive. He's alive. Before you sound the alarm, Izuku whispers, breath lodged in his throat. I wanted to ask something of you. Preferably before Endeavor gets back. Todoroki stares at him, ice curling up his arm defensively but he's curious. He's always been too curious. Shinso may have loved cats much like Aizawa, but Todoroki always acted the most like one, and he won't use his fire because he's still fearful of his quirk. Go ahead, he replies, curtly. Izuku smiles behind his mask. Can I have your permission to destroy Endeavor's career? Todoroki blinks at him and it's only because Izuku has known the boy in front of him for 4 years that he's able to understand him. Curiosity, confusion, brief flashes of joy, suspicion, all conveyed within the span of twitching lips, cheek biting and eyebrow raises. You broke into his house, Todoroki says, slowly, to speak to me, so you can ask permission to destroy his career. Yes, why not just do it? I have information regarding his abuse, Izuku says, bluntly. A shoulder lift, a clench of a fist, a shift of feet. Anger, fear, more confusion. I have information about you, your mother, Chuya's suspicious death, Endeavor hiding the abuse, hiding Natsuo's quirkless diagnosis, hiding the fact Rei is able to be released from the hospital. As Izuku speaks, Todoroki's eyes get wider and wider and wider until he's openly staring at Izuku. How? He hisses and then tilts his head. Defensiveness. Why would anyone believe you? Because I have the documents with his signatures on. He speaks. Plus, I'm an informant of the police. If I tell them to investigate, they investigate. Todoroki stares at him. Izuku refuses to shift under the attention as he maps his friend's face, trying to ignore Shoto's face as he died. This is the Todoroki he must know now. This is the only Todoroki now. No more Shoto. No more friendship. Not if it means his survival. If he can do this, if Todoroki agrees, Endeavor goes away, and the first nail is nailed in Hero Society's coffin. Izuku doesn't want to destroy the commission. Doing so would ruin society, lead to its collapse. Without heroes, it would become lawless quickly, as seen by the after. But he doesn't agree with the way things are currently being ran. If Endeavor goes, then other heroes will be investigated, possibly outed. As everyone focuses on them, Izuku can get Hawks out. And with heroes being monitored to a higher standard, when All Might retires, there will be less destruction because the younger heroes would be actual heroes instead of glorified celebrities. Don't mention Natsuo's quirklessness, Todoroki says finally, and Izuku must twitch her paws because Todoroki's eyes narrow. I'm not ashamed of my brother, but I know he'd be swarmed. Not a quirkist like your father, Izuku mumbles, and Todoroki actually rolls his eyes. Tell the police first. I'd rather it not be leaked, but if they don't, if that doesn't stop him. He has 4 days, as per my usual cases. Izuku says. Anything else? Todoroki pauses and then quietly asks, my mother can be released. Izuku nods, softening. Yes, she has been due to be released for a while. Todoroki nods and Izuku steps back, half bows at him. He rifles through his gear and grabs a business card he made. He gives it over to Todoroki. If you need anything, he says. He'll hand over his information to Tsukauchi and then wait. If Endeavor hasn't been arrested by the 4th day, the information will be leaked to the media. Todoroki watches as he walks down the hallway, preparing to leave, but he can't help but stop. He looks back. Behind his goggles, green eyes meet mismatched ones. Todoroki-san, he calls. Yes, random vigilante. Izuku snorts. He's missed this, missed Todoroki, missed his dryness. Moro's, he corrects and makes sure to have his hand on the door handle when he next speaks. Todoroki-san, your quirk, it's beautiful, powerful, and 100% yours. Not his, not hers. Your quirk, your power. I understand wanting to be petty. I understand wanting to take back whatever control you can get, but not using your fire is not only illogical, but frankly concerning. It's yours, Todoroki-san, and it's your choice whether to be a hero or not. Don't waste something good because of where it came from. Without looking back to see his reaction, Izuku leaves the Todoroki household. It takes 2 days for Endeavor to be arrested. The media immediately catch wind. It takes 3 further days before the full, or most of it anyway, because of the arrest no further information was released. Story comes out, along with Moro's name being attached to it. Abuse, both child abuse and domestic abuse. Quirk marriages. Chuya's suspicious death. So much is shown, it is impossible to hide from. People start protesting for stricter restrictions on heroes. Some demand investigations into other heroes, others start sharing their own stories. A week later, the Hero Commission release a statement explaining that Endeavor has had his hero license removed. In an apartment, Shota sits with his husband and new daughter, and together they watch the news with thinly veiled surprise. The number 3 pro hero is not only being arrested and held accountable, he's no longer a hero. It seems Moro's isn't afraid to target the top 10. It seems Moro's is more powerful, more deadly than he first thought. Nedzu sits in his office, sharp grin pulling at his muzzle, bearing sharp, white teeth. This is interesting. A new vigilante, being dubbed a villain, taking out a whole Yakuza operation. Shota is his favorite student, not only because of his intelligence and efficiency as both a teacher and hero, but because he likes to ask for Nedzu's thoughts on particular cases he finds intriguing, and then putting the number 2 hero in jail. White paws reach for a teacup. This is very interesting indeed. He wonders if he can hack into Moro's forum. Across town, Dabi stares at the TV in the homeless shelter in shock. Moro's wasn't lying. He did something. He got Endeavor charged and had his license taken from him. Maybe contacting him regarding Toga won't be such an issue. When looking at the news, the name suddenly hits him. Moros. The same person who killed all those Yazuka members. A mass murderer, an A-class villain told him to be a better brother. Dabi chokes on his spit. On the Moros forum, a lone message pops up. From I Hate Endeavor. Hello, Moros. Thank you. T.S. And a new section within the forum is created. I am going to marry Moros. Trying to find Shinso Hitoshi is almost as difficult as trying to track down Dabi or Toga. He has no social media and hacking into fostering files is rather easy, but that's only helpful if the paperwork has been filled out correctly. Which it hasn't. For the record, Izuku ends up traveling for 3 days, hopping between houses where Shinso is supposed to be and finding nothing. It's as if the boy doesn't exist. It makes something angry curl in Izuku's gut. It makes him nervous. In the after, Shinso rarely spoke about his childhood, about before being Minjak. Izuku found out, the longer they both stayed alive, that Shinso was in the foster system for a long time, going from house to house, family to family. That's all that was said. That's all he would say on the matter. And when it came to survival, Izuku really didn't need to know much more. Because they were in the after. Nothing else mattered. By the 4th day, he's honestly contemplating hacking into police files or local school files to find him when he spots blonde hair on a rooftop. His gut clenches. His mouth goes dry. His first thought is Katsuki and he nearly brains himself on the pavement trying to get there as quickly as possible. His second thought is Toga. What he doesn't expect to find is Mono Manito sitting on the edge of a rooftop, swinging his legs back and forth idly. Messy blonde hair that's not in his usual slicked back style. A big, light blue hoodie and dark jeans. Nothing like the Monoma he used to know. Izuku knows he's not going to jump. He eventually makes it to Class 1B. Yet seeing him like this, no confidence or arrogance, is strange and borderline disturbing. Hey, Izuku calls as he makes it to the rooftop, holding up his hands in a surrender when Silver Eye snapped to him, away from the horizon. Is everything okay? Monoma sniffs at him, looking him over. I don't recognize you. Izuku smiles behind the mask. I'm not a hero, he says, slowly edging closing. Monoma watches but doesn't tell him to leave, so Izuku keeps going until he can sit beside him. I don't know what I count as really. He remembers the lessons in mental health crises. He knows that he needs to approach this cautiously, calmly. Try to not push Monoma into any unnecessary corners and let him come to Izuku. Let him speak or cry or do whatever he needs to before trying to pull him from the edge. However, this is the first time he will use those lessons. During the war, there were many attempted suicides, and a few people did end up taking their own lives. But Izuku was never there and too busy trying not to die to see the signs. He was their #1 pro hero, at 16 years old, with a quirk that was their inevitable downfall. Izuku was kept away from that type of horror. He had a war to fight. But he was told about the ones that fell to their own minds. Hiroshima after Katsuki's death had fallen sullen and quiet, but the war didn't stop for anyone. Even Izuku hadn't had the time to mourn. He had to keep fighting. They all did, which is probably why they didn't see the signs laid out before them. A week later, in the UA dorm, Ashido found Kirishima's body. Physically unbreakable but not mentally. Not after Katsuki. It was too much too quickly. Izuku still remembers the way Todoroki, Iida, Asui and Uraraka had refused to leave his side. Even Aizawa had kept him close. All afraid he would follow in Kirishima's footsteps. He won't lie and say he didn't consider it. After Katsuki, everything felt empty. It felt as if they had already lost. There was no victory anymore, no color to the world. His constant since birth was taken from him, and he soon became the eldest, when Izuku's birthday came and went and Katsuki's didn't. But his friends needed him. Eri needed him. All for One and Shigaraki weren't going to stop because Izuku felt like he couldn't get out of bed. So, he refused to think about it. He kept pushing, kept fighting, kept losing people. Iida, then his mum, then All Might, then Todoroki, then Aizawa. Then Asui and Uraraka. One after the other, until it was just him, standing on a battlefield of destruction, holding Eri in his grip, knowing they were both about to die. If you're not a hero, Monoma interrupts his thoughts. Why do you care? Because you're important, Izuku says, honestly. Maybe you don't feel like you are, but someone out there is going to miss you if you do this. Even if it's just a potted plant. Monoma snorts, looks back to the horizon. Sure, just like how they cared about my cousin disappearing. Izuku perks up at that. He was never really close to Monoma, so a missing family member is certainly as intriguing. Like Shinso, they both kept their private lives private. If I have a name, I could see if I could find them for you. Izuku offers. Monoma shrugs. Toga Himiko, he says, and Izuku's heart drops to his stomach. My auntie and uncle hated her because of her villainous quirk. Quirks aren't even villainous. Izuku interrupts. They're just tools. It's not the gun's fault for shooting someone. Monoma turns to face him. Exactly, he shouts. Izuku smiles. This is getting closer to the Monoma he remembers. Everyone is so obsessed with quirks that they refuse to see the person underneath. Is that why you're up here? Izuku hazards a guess and Monoma tenses. I'm going to be honest and tell you that people like that are assholes. Whatever your quirk is, you can be whatever you want with it. A doctor, teacher, hero, villain, vigilante, Monoma comments, eyeing Izuku's gear, and he laughs. Yeah, he agrees. If you want to be. Monoma scoffs. I'm a legacy kid. I have to be a hero and I'm already failing at that. I'm always failing. If Izuku didn't know any better, he'd assume he was speaking to an opposite version of Katsuki. Both of these blondes have superiority and inferiority complexes. Both are dramatic as. That's a lie, Izuku states, confidently. Monoma rolls his eyes. You don't know me. I know you have potential. When Monoma looks at him, Izuku flails his arms about. What? I do. A wise man once told me, life's and then you die, so you might as well live to the best of your ability to spite it. I think that's beautiful, and fitting. Aizawa truly is a wise man. A good one, too. Those are always harder to find. Monoma looks close to arguing, but there must be something in Izuku's tone for him to pause, to think it over. Izuku lets the moment sit for a second before saying, if it's any consolation, I don't know you, but if you were to jump, I'd be sad. Don't make me sad. That's mean. Monoma stares at him incredulously and then starts to laugh. Not his usual, head thrown back cackle, but a more genuine one. You're a strange person, Monoma says and swings his legs over to the safe side of the roof. Thank you, Izuku says, following him and grabbing another of his business cards, holding it out. I'll try and find your cousin. If you need anything. Monoma takes the card with an eyebrow raised. Izuku waits atop the building to make sure he's safely on the ground before turning and jumping to the next roof. He has an insomniac to find. On the forum, a new person joins and immediately heads to the I am going to marry Moro's section. From Copycat. Chapter text. When All for One heard about the Shihasaikai being slaughtered, he had to admit, he was a little interested. In fact, he was a little more than interested. It wasn't every day someone took down a big Yakuza crime ring and left without a trace. But All for One is a busy man. A busy man who is trying to raise his pseudo-son to be the next symbol of evil. He doesn't have time to look into every new villain, and he sure doesn't care what they get up to. As long as his business keeps running, he couldn't care less about what the rest of the world is doing. So, he goes back to focusing on his own organization and the doctor's creations. Nomus need his help when it comes to stockpiling their quirks, and he's more than happy to sit and discuss quirk theory with the doctor, both of them planning how to make the Nomus stronger, faster, more efficient. They're truly fascinating creatures and he couldn't wait to use them to their fullest capabilities. With them, he could have an army. He can see it now. Blood and screams and utter destruction. Buildings crumbling to dust. Mountains of corpses of the pro-heroes he despises, and All Might's head on a stick in the center, proving how he's nothing. He can almost feel his brother's quirk rushing through his veins, can almost feel his brother's spirit watching over him, never leaving him. But less than a month later, Endeavor is being arrested for abuse. This catches all for one's attention, especially when a similar name was mentioned. Moros, personification of doom but also involved with destiny. Ancient Greek in nature, not quite a god but not quite a civilian either. When he finds out the Vigilantes Forum is named Elysium, the fields of the underworld for gods and those who are blessed by them. All for one's curiosity is piqued. He's always like mythology. He remembers reading his son bedtime stories about the heroes and monsters. His son was fond of Theseus the most. How he was able to navigate the labyrinth, how he survived regardless of the perilous situation he was in. All for one couldn't help but mention another famous Theseus, the ship of Theseus, and was delighted when his son kept asking questions about it. He is old enough now to know the ship is still the same ship, just with different parts. He is no longer the man he was, nor will he ever be that man. Too much time has passed. Too much has happened for him to remind that ship without bumps and breaks and splinters. But he isn't a completely different vessel. He is no longer the man he was, but that man was all for one before he had the name. And that man is curious about Moros, so of course he starts to investigate, sending out spies, and he is surprised by how many refused to talk. Even for someone like him, someone who everyone has heard of at least once. They had the audacity to look at him and shake their heads. Moros has the underground listening but also fearing and respecting them. It's fascinating. He sends more spies out, asking for any information they have, demanding someone give him something. Color him surprised when one of his spies returns and says, Moros was seen around that apartment block, boss. Ah, all for one says. He knows the one, intimately. Are you suggesting what I assume you are? The man before him nods. Yes, boss. All for one waves his hand. The man walks away, leaving him to his thoughts. He wonders the accuracy of these claims and knows his spies would never lie to him, for fear of the consequences. He presses a button on his chair and waits for the doctor to appear through one of Kurogiri's portals. Yes, the doctor asks, fiddling with his glasses. Send in that French boy, all for one says. I need him to make a friend. Hitoshi wakes up on the Monday, face aching from the punch and wrist aching from where his foster father gripped him hard enough to draw blood. He rises, stepping over the other 3 children shoved into this room, gets ready and goes to school. That night, the muzzle is forced onto his face, ripping into the skin of his cheekbones, pulling at his jaw. He cannot eat dinner that night, nor the following morning, and drinking is near impossible. On Wednesday, after another black eye, Hitoshi throws himself out of the open, downstairs window and runs away. Just him, his bruises, and the goddamn muzzle on his face. By Thursday, he's yet to get the muzzle off, is starting to get severely dehydrated, and knows he has very little choices. 1. Call his foster agent and ask to be rehomed. 2. Go back home and pray his punishment won't be too bad. 3. Sit in an alley and wait for death. He doubts it would be a quick one. It's late at night, the sun having set an hour ago. The air is cool, and the streets have long since grown quiet and eerily still. Hitoshi has officially run out of options. He can't stay on these streets, he'll die and he doesn't want to die. Not yet. He doesn't want to imagine how his parents would react when they got the news. They gave themselves up for him, he can't risk their rehabilitation. He's just started to make his walk back to the house when a figure drops in front of him. Hitoshi jerks back, panic and fear and dread curling in his gut. With the muzzle on, he can't use his quirk to defend himself. It makes him dizzy, vision swimming, hands shaking. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't. You're a difficult person to find. The figure speaks, and it's vaguely boyish, the tone light and easy and not at all threatening. They're small, compact, dressed in all black with a mask covering the lower half of their face and goggles hiding their eyes. Whoever they are, they're definitely not a hero. Heroes don't jump down out of nowhere in all black. Well, he knows underground heroes do, but Hitoshi knows way too much about unders. They're his favorite heroes and he hopes he can be one. Despite whom his parents are, both are supportive of his heroic dreams. He wants to make them proud, wants to give other villainous quirk kids a role model. But this isn't an under he knows off. Which mean, This is either a villain or a vigilante. For this person's future survival, he hopes they're not about to kill him. Easy, the person says. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to get that muzzle off. If you'll let me. Totally fine if you don't. But it's going to make having a conversation awkward. The person mumbles become quick and fast, and Hitoshi tilts his body so that the streetlight hits his hands. He lifts them and starts to sign. He doubts the person could understand, but if they can. Immediately the person is focusing on his hands and nodding along. They know sign language, so he asks why they care so much about him. You're important, the person says, bluntly. And I want to help you. Out of the muzzle, and to a better home. Hitoshi is lost. Well and truly lost. He keeps signing Y, over and over, because he doesn't understand. He's nothing special. In fact, he's often regarded as villainous because of his quirk, because of his parents. Even having a foster family makes him one of the lucky kids. Why would this random stranger help him? Why would he tell Hitoshi he's important when he's not? I have a savior complex, the person says. Believe that if you don't believe my actual motives, which are, you need help and I want to help you. The person reaches into their utility belt and pulls out a set of small, lock-picking tools. May I? They ask, gesturing to the muzzle. Hitoshi has no idea what to do, so he just nods. The person moves slowly behind Hitoshi, and he feels pressure as the person starts to work on unlocking it. He begins to talk. I'm Moro's, by the way. Him. Yes, the goggles are an inspiration of Eraserhead's. He's pretty cool. You heard of him? Hitoshi nods. Eraserhead is his favorite hero. He's really grumpy and I've heard he's got an addiction to coffee, but who hasn't? Moro's keeps talking and the tense line of Hitoshi's shoulders starts to relax. There's a rumor he feeds stray cats, which is frankly too adorable for a man that terrifying. Hitoshi makes a mental note of that. There is not a lot of information on most unders and Eraserhead seems to hate attention more than most. It makes sense. Unlike spotlighters, attention is bad for unders. They work best in the shadows. Liking coffee is a plus. Hitoshi loves coffee considering his quirk gives him insomnia. Cats are a different plus. If Hitoshi were given 3 wishes, one of them would be to pet every cat in the world. He could die happy then. One of the good houses. No severe punishments, foster parents that took an interest in his schooling, his own room, had a cat. A big Maine Coon called Fish, who would curl on Hitoshi's chest when he tried to sleep. But his foster mother fell pregnant, and they only had one room. Not that he hates them for that. They were the kindest to him. They deserved to be happy. With a click, he feels the muzzle pull from his skin. He catches it as it tumbles from his face, leaving his cheeks bloody from where it dug in. Thank you, he croaks and Moro's bounces back in front of him. I don't have any water on me, sorry, but if you're happy with me handing you over to a good family, we can do that. Or I can walk you to a police station. Why not home? Hitoshi asks, and then winces. Moro's doesn't know about his quirk, but he hasn't asked. You're being abused, Moro's says, lightly. I don't feel comfortable handing you back to people who hurt you. The police won't help, he breathes, looking anywhere other than those goggles. Then let's go to a hero who will help. Moro's says, confidently. Promise. Hitoshi stares at Moro's. Moro's stares back. Well, it can't be worse than the muzzle. If I don't like it, I'll run. He says and Moro's nods. Starts to bounce on his heels. That's fair. He pulls out a phone, types something in and then turns his head. Beside him, in the puddle, the water rises until it becomes an outline of a person. Water lifts and shimmers, like a river running vertically. The second the form has stilled, the water splashes back down to the puddle, leaving a man with bright orange hair and snake-like eyes. Ready? He asks, voice low, like waves crashing against rock, and Moro's nods. Thanks again for this. I know it's on such short notice. The man's eyes soften. Thank the rain more than me. He holds out a hand and Moro's is happy to take it before they both turn to Hitoshi. It feels weird the first time, but Tanaka-san's quirk is so cool. Moro says, voice elated, and the man, Tanaka, rolls his eyes, but despite his terrifying exterior, he seems to like Moro's. Hitoshi, with nothing to lose, grabs Tanaka's other hand. Moro's is right. It does feel weird as the air is stolen from his lungs and his body becomes weightless. Then there's a rush, almost as if he's being pushed upside down and then being held up once again. When he opens his eyes, water splashes away and they end up on a roof. Strangely enough, his clothes and hair are dry, not a hint of water on him. They've installed cameras, Moro's murmurs, looking at the roof entrance where a camera points at the door. Then he looks to Tanaka. Thank you. Anytime, boss, Tanaka says and disappears back into the water. Moro's looks back to Hitoshi and gestures to the door. They probably have alarms since I was here last, so I'll give you the information you need before I'm chased. Hitoshi blinks. Chased. Moro's waves his question off. You're about to meet Aizawa and Yamada. They're both heroes. They're really nice and have a new foster daughter called Eri, who is the absolute sweetest. You're going to love her. Then Moro's waves and says, tell them about this. Bye. He throws Hitoshi the muzzle and then jumps off the roof. Hitoshi gasps, eyes wide as he stumbles to the edge to see Moro's running across an adjacent roof before dropping away into the darkness. Numbly, Hitoshi stares off and only startles when a minute later, the roof access door slams open and two men appear. Hitoshi faces them and then freezes. One is tall and blonde, with glasses over his nose and a mustache. He's wearing a leather jacket and pajama sweatpants. He looks like he just woke up, eyes unfocused and hands clenched into fists. Next to him is a lankier man, all lean muscle, with dark hair rising from his shoulders and blood-red eyes glaring at Hitoshi. He's dressed in a dark shirt and dark jeans, but there's a white scarf curled around his head. Hitoshi can't feel the ache in his throat. The ache he's had since he was 4 years old. The ache he shares with his mum. Which means his quirk is gone. Or at least, has been stopped. This is Eraserhead, and if the rumors are correct online in some under forums, that's present Mike beside him. Hi, he croaks, holding up the muzzle. Moro said you could help. Shota sits in the police station and stares at the bin, overflowing with his 5 empty cups of shitty coffee and wonders what he's done to deserve this. By his feet, Eri is coloring in a book Nimori gave her, asking Shinso Hitoshi what color pencils she should use. Dutifully, the purple-haired boy answers and she nods as if this is an extremely important decision and starts to color. Hazashi is at the front desk, signing their names for the emergency foster license to take effect while Shota sits here and watches Tsukauchi's face grow angrier and angrier as he scans over Shinso's file. Shota wants to look but he doesn't trust himself to. He knows if it can make a man as calm as Tsukauchi look like that, it would make him murderous. He can't be murderous. He has Eri to think about. Then again, Hazashi is a good father. He can be trusted to look after Eri while Shota goes hunting. The muzzle has been taken as evidence and an in-house paramedic disinfected the cuts around Shinso's face and handed him a few water bottles. Shota nearly laughed when the boy eyed his shitty coffee hungrily. He understands that feeling very well. But he's dehydrated and borderline malnourished, so no coffee. Did the Yamasakis put that muzzle on you? Tsukauchi asks. Yes, Shinso replies between sips. After Shota found him on the roof, and Shinso mentioned Moro's, the police station was his best bet. Especially with how Shinso reacted at that, Tsukauchi's quirk was a godsend. So initial introductions and explanations aside, Shinso Hitoshi. I'm 14. My quirk is, it's brainwashing. Yes, my foster parents aren't good. Yes, my real parents are villains. Yes, Moro's found me. I don't know why but he said these heroes would help me. Can I have some coffee? Shota knows he's not letting this kid go. He's his now. Eri was a brief concern. She was fresh in their house, young and dealing with trauma. But she took one look at Shinso, at the open wounds on his cheeks and simply asked, did Moro's help you? Shinso had nodded and Eri had smiled, offered her name, and then asked which plushie he preferred. Shinso had said the unicorn one Hazashi bought her. The unicorn plushie is now sitting beside her. Right, Tsukauchi says and then sighs. He looks up and Shota winces at the bruises under his eyes. They're almost big enough to rival his own. Moro's is really making them all work overtime. Shinso, are you happy to live with Aizawa and Yamada? And me, Eri chirps. Shinso's face drops from panic to soft in milliseconds. Yeah, he says. I am. Tsukauchi nods. That's good. Yamada is currently filling out the paper. Do you mind watching Eri while I talk to Aizawa about something? Shinso meets his eyes. Purple, the color of dark amethyst, meets Tsukauchi's black. Now that Shota is looking, he can see Shinso's father in those hypnotic eyes, in his sharp cheekbones and tired appearance. His quirk, however, is nearly identical to his mother's. This is about Moro's, isn't it? Tsukauchi's lips quirk. Yes. Shinso spends a moment longer staring and then he nods, focusing back on Eri's drawing. Shota follows Tsukauchi out, watches the door close and then cuts to the chase. What's bothering you? This whole situation isn't bothering you. Tsukauchi hits back. Moro's, a known mass murderer, keeps dropping kids off at your apartment. Shota shrugs, hands curled in his pockets, back leaning against the wall. Despite his murders, he's never been outwardly hostile to anyone else. Well, endeavor, which just makes me feel a little respect for him. Eraser. Tsukauchi groans. They're child abusers. Shota replies and Tsukauchi groans again. Still murder. Tsukauchi says. Look, I'm confused by his angle. He kills the Yakuza and that's normally gang warfare, but then he saves Eri. So, I assume she was the target the whole time. Even though no one else knew she even existed. He takes on Endeavor because he knew about the abuse and gets him jailed. And then he, randomly finds an abused kid, one with villains as parents, and drops him off at your doorstep. It doesn't make sense. None of it fits. Maybe he goes by his own code, Shota says. We've both seen those before. His code is don't be a child abuser. Tsukauchi comments and then runs a hand across his face. I suppose it could be worse. I still don't like it though. Hazashi approaches, smile in place as he saunters over, hands gripping the paperwork. Everything okay? He asks and Shota turns his gaze onto Tsukauchi. Yeah, he says, waving them off. Go and get some sleep. I'll call you if I have something. I'll call if he drops another kid off. Tsukauchi rolls his eyes and leaves. A new person joins Elysium. On the I am going to marry Moro's section, the person adds their own message. From Sleepycat. Nope. I am. He's mine now. Mum, Izuku says, quietly, silently appearing behind her as she cooks dinner. She nearly jumps but has grown so used to his silent footfalls, she barely even twitches. Yes, Izu. Am I a bad person? He asks, voice barely audible. That makes her pause. She dials the heat down, turns so she can face him. His head is ducked, eyes averted, hands wringing together before him so tightly, the skin on his knuckles is white. Why are you asking? She questions, lightly. He shrugs, still won't meet her eyes. I've done bad things. I don't want to be a bad person, but I think I might be. His voice hitches and he sniffles and Inko wants to rush over and hug him, but this isn't her Izuku. He wouldn't relax into her hold, trusting her to put his broken pieces back together. This Izuku will collapse inwards, use his shattered parts as weapons. She knows because he's becoming more like his father each day. Hasashi used to get angry. Never at her, but on the phone, to people she would occasionally catch glimpses of. Always in the corner of her eye. Always in the distance. His anger never scared her, but she knew he could be scary, knew he could hurt people if he wanted. Izuku has his eyes, his newfound confidence, and even his build as he picks up more and more muscle. All he's lacking is his height, his white hair, and morals. Do you enjoy it? She asks, in the growing silence. What you do that makes you think you're a bad person, do you enjoy doing that? She won't ask. She knows better than to do that. Hasashi is a businessman. Izuku is her quirkless, 14-year-old son. Nothing more, nothing less. Midoriyas are known for their crying gene. Very few people realize how good they are at being ignorant for the sake of ignorance. Izuku shakes his head, green curls bobbing. No, I don't. Then you're not a bad person, Inko tells her son and accepts the shuddering sobs as he falls into her arms. Izuku has Hasashi's eyes, his build, his confidence, but he still doesn't have his height, his hair, his morals. Inko is more than relieved. It's okay, baby. She breathes into his hair. It's okay. You can let it out. I've got you. You could never be a bad person, Izu. There's not a bad bone in your body. Izuku chokes on a sob. He sniffles. Even my extra toe joint. Inko laughs into her son's hair. They'll be alright. She swears it. Yeah, baby. Even your extra toe joint. Endeavor gets arrested on live TV just as he's starting his patrol days after Shoto meets Moros. The news is rife with discussions about why Natsuo is able to hide from most of it considering he's in his on-campus dorm, but Shoto and Fuyumi are housebound as reporters swarm their home like angry wasps. The blinds are closed, and the door is bolted shut. 2 days after Endeavor is arrested, the police make a statement discussing Moro's involvement in bringing to light some allegations. They explain pending child abuse charges, along with possibly charging him for Tuya's death. Halfway through the description of that night, of ashen bone and flame, Fuyumi turns the TV off and disappears into her room, tears pouring from her eyes. Shoto doesn't quite know what to make of it. Any of it. Moro's followed through. Father has been arrested and he's going to stay there. And then, by the end of the week, the Hero Commission announce he's losing his license. No more number 2 ranking. No more being Endeavor. Shoto stares and stares and stares. Natsuo calls to say he's coming home. Fuyumi is dealing with the paperwork regarding Mother. Shoto contemplates his future at Tuya's shrine, wondering what to do. Does he want to be a hero? He does. He realizes, when they stand outside of the hospital as Mother is released and Natsuo is home and Fuyumi is crying as she holds the white-haired woman. He wants to be a hero so that he can someday help someone the way Moro's helped him. He wants to be a better hero than Endeavor. Hello, Mother, he greets when she turns to him, unsure where they stand. Oh, Shoto, she whispers and then her hands are fluttering and Shoto steps into her embrace. She's freezing cold and yet it's the most comforting hug he's ever received. She's free. She can finally come home. When they return to their house, she looks uncomfortable but there's a smile to her lips. She fusses around and that night, she makes their dinner. She even remembers that Shoto likes his soba cold. Fuyumi is still crying and Natsuo is talking too much and Shoto feels complete. He aches for the space left for Tuya but they're as complete as they can be with a dead brother and an imprisoned father. That night, Shoto spends his time on Moro's forum, Elysium. He sees people asking for help, he sees others offering it. There are Quirk talks and hero discussions. There are links to other websites that offer assistance. Moro's has changed his life for the better. Shoto will do whatever it takes to help him too. Izuku has a list. He needs to fix his classmates but also the villains. Shinso is with a good home. Monoma has his number if he needs help, and Endeavor can't hurt his family anymore. Dabi has his number so hopefully soon he'll meet Toga and he's trying to pinpoint where Stain is. He's found Magna and Spinner. Spinner is currently staying in a homeless shelter for mutant types while Magna is the bouncer at an underground club. It's taken him the last few months to find Compress, who is conveniently tied to a bunch of art robberies. Well, not him. Just a quirk like his. Muscular is a problem. So is Moonfish. Izuku has no idea where they could be. Lady Nagant is still residing inside Tartarus. Mustard is like Shinso. Difficult to find, but worse, because Izuku doesn't even know the boy's name. He can't get to All for One, or the Doctor, or Shigaraki and Kurogiri. The latter, he would like to help as much as he can. The former, less so. He is surprised when Aoyama Yuga appears in his classroom. Izuku is still ignoring Katsuki and the rest of his class, and while everyone else has decided he's a lost cause, especially with school ending soon, Katsuki has changed. He's watching Izuku now, almost like a hawk. He keeps trying to corner him, but Izuku is faster. Unlike Katsuki, he doesn't want to talk. He can't. Not when all he sees is his bloody face in the grass, heart punctured and eyes vacant. Best Jeanist trying desperately to stitch him up while Aizawa screams at losing his first student. Izuku had been too late. Izuku is always too late. So, he ignores Katsuki and Katsuki keeps staring and then Aoyama walks through the doors like he owns the place. Blonde hair and bright smile, He sashays in and poses. Everyone, their teacher speaks. This is Aoyama Yuga, play nice. He goes back to reading his book while everyone starts shouting questions. Izuku simply watches as Aoyama deflects all of them, making his way to his chair, conveniently next to his, and sits down. Hello, Mon Ami, he greets. Izuku, knowing what he knows, realizes how sad his eyes are. How sharp. It's simply magnificent to meet you. Izuku wonders if this means all for one has heard about Moros. He wonders how he knows it's Izuku. Hi, he says back. Bluntly, he adds, I'm quirkless. Something flashes in Aoyama's eyes before he shrugs it off. Of course, he would. In Izuku's original timeline, they were two alike with their stolen quirks and secrets weighing them down. It doesn't matter, Mon Ami. Quirk or no quirk. Izuku wants desperately to roll his eyes, but instead he smiles. Not his sunshine beam, just Izuku. Midoriya Izuku, he offers and holds out his hand. Aoyama takes it. That day, he speaks to Aoyama and finds that most of what he talks about is the truth. His love of cheese, the fact he's homesick, speaking in French insults to see Katsuki twitch because he understands. But at the end of the day, Izuku can't have him following him. If All for One knows who he is, hiding this life won't stop anything, but, in all honesty, he hated how things turned out with Aoyama. The arrest, his usually flamboyant outfit swapped out for prison scrubs. He wants to help this boy out, not place him in a cell. He's quick to leave that day and quick to hunt down more information on Mustard. He's waiting on Dabi to message him about Toga because he doesn't want to push. They have to come to him to build trust. So, he searches for Stain, for Muscular and Moonfish, while doing his daily patrol. Most of the time it's people in Elysium asking for help. Izuku likes these nights. He likes feeling important, needed, seen. These are people he never knew before. People that needed help but were never able to get it before because Moros doesn't ask questions. He shows up and he does what he can, and sometimes that's only saving a cat from a tree, and sometimes it's holding a scared child, as social services are called. He likes meeting people, learning about them, listening to their stories, because a lot of these people are frightened and angry and alone. They have mutation quirks and villainous quirks, and Moros doesn't care. He stays and he helps, and he doesn't ask for anything in return. He's only out for an hour or two at most, and then he heads back. Musudafu will not fall if he is not there. But some nights feel longer. Some nights, he sits atop tall buildings and thinks about whether his mum would hate him if she knew he had killed people. Some nights, he wakes from memories of his friends dying, always dying, bleeding, screaming, and lays across a roof in the rain just to feel alive, just to hear the noise of cars and see a sky not filled with ash but with stars. Some nights, Izuku feels the knowledge he has weigh on his shoulders, pushing at his chest until he can barely breathe without feeling his bones creak and his lungs protest. It's one of those nights as he scopes out areas. Mostly because of Aoyama. A traitor who did what he had to. A traitor that led to the training camp, that led to Katsuki being kidnapped, to All Might using up the remains of One for All. A traitor that was not a traitor, but a friend. Izuku doesn't hate him, nor is he feeling particularly vindictive. Izuku sees himself in Aoyama. That constant fear, the lying, the stolen quirk, wanting to be powerful, knowing the world will only see them as quirkless people. Weak, worthless, useless, pathetic. He understands the boy, knows why he's doing this and who is making him do it. But Izuku remembers the agony of his bones shattering when fighting Muscular to save Kota. He remembers the fear and the anger of the villains trying to take Katsuki. He remembers losing him, the horror and abject acceptance in those red eyes as Kurogiri's portal of black closed around him. Izuku knows what could happen. He knows Dabi could turn and go and burn the Todoroki household with his siblings inside just to get his revenge. He knows Compress will escalate to bank robberies, knows Magna kills someone in self-defense and is cast aside, knows Twice is out there, breaking himself apart, knows Spinner and Toga have been pushed away from society. He wants to help them. He wants to offer them a chance at redemption. But seeing them physically pains him, in the same way seeing Katsuki does, in the same way meeting Todoroki did. Because every time Izuku sits in class and listens to the popping of explosions, sees spiked blonde hair and blood-red eyes, he sees Katsuki's dead body. His first friend, his childhood friend, his bully, his rival, his best friend. Cold and unmoving, chest still, blood pooling around him. He sees 14-year-old Katsuki and can't help but see 16-year-old Katsuki's corpse. Izuku is a mess, he knows. He also knows that having someone else know could be beneficial. He trusts Aizawa with his life and he knows that Detective Tsukauchi's quirk means his insane life story will ping as true. He doesn't want to risk it though. Not when he's already saving people without help. He knows once he releases some of the information he has on the Hero Commission to Nedzu, he'll have an ally there, but actually talking about what he's lived through sounds. A change in the wind. Izuku jumps from the side of the building down onto the fire escape and twists his body only to spot a red feather inches from his face. He stills. There is no point running from the fastest man alive. Hawks. Well, this is going to be a problem. Before you kill me, he says, lowly, knowing Hawks can pick up the vibrations through his feather. Can I tell you a secret? Izuku is at a very big disadvantage here. He doesn't have a quirk and Hawks will always be faster than him. If he had fire, he could potentially burn the feathers away like Dobby did, but he doesn't. He can't fight Hawks, like this, and win. All he can do is wait. Either to be stabbed with a feather and for his body to never be found, or for Hawks to listen. In the darkness, his thermal goggles are able to pick out a figure dropping from the sky. A secret, Hawks says, and it's with that same infuriating happy tone that's all fake. Even from this distance, Izuku can see the tension in Hawks' shoulders, the way his talons keep clenching. He remembers Keigo from the after. His wings were healing, and his eyes were dull, and he wasn't Hawks there. He didn't have to be. The commission was gone and Keigo, for the first time in his life since he was sold, was free. They were in the middle of war and Keigo was happier than he had ever been. A bird freed from its cage. A cage he never spoke about, even then, even when he became one of the last heroes alive. Yep, Izuku replies with his own happy inflection. A really important secret. Sure, Hawks says, wings spanning wide. Go ahead. Izuku has one chance at that. Hawks isn't a killer, even if he has killed before. He remembers the days during the war. The way Hawks would push and push and push himself until he would eventually pass out just to hide from the nightmares. Hawks may not want to kill, but if those are his orders, he will follow them. So Izuku inhales and says, clearly, Takami Haruto and Takami Tomi had a son, Takami Keigo. Hawks freezes, feathers stilling in place. Izuku continues. After years of abuse, Haruto was arrested by Endeavor and Tomi took her son and ran, only for her son to save a group of people in a car accident. The Hero Commission made a deal, and the boy was bought and used. He was taught under Tsutsumi Kana until she could no longer handle the blood on her hands and killed the president. She was imprisoned after her name was dragged through the tabloids, leaving the boy to become the Hero Commission's weapon. Izuku closes his mouth, exhales, and waits. Hawks stares at him. Izuku stares back. How do you know that? He asks, finally, fake tone gone. I know lots of things, Izuku replies. And I don't like child abusers. Hawks continues to stare at him. Izuku refuses to twitch like the prey animal he's feeling. I haven't heard that name in a long time, he says, finally, and Izuku gives a slow shrug. I can call you that if you want. You're too nice for someone about to disappear. Izuku laughs at that. Let's just say I've been in these situations before. If the commission want me dead, I can't stop them, can I? Even if I can free you, and get Lady Nagant out of Tartarus, who's to say they won't send someone else? At least Izuku knows Hawks. Hawks' wings twitch. Free me. Izuku tilts his head. How do you think I know all that about you? The commission keeps tabs on you and their files are very informative. Leaking it won't stop it, Hawks says, quietly, and Izuku grins behind his mask. I can't stop them because that would cause society to break down, he replies. But I won't let them do this. Hawks looks at him. There is no relief to his shoulders, no sudden loss of tension. He doesn't believe him and that's fine. Izuku wouldn't believe himself either if he hadn't already accomplished a lot. I stopped the Yakuza from abusing that little girl. I stopped Endeavor. He says, quietly, refusing to look away from those sharp, dangerous eyes. I'll stop them, Takami. Maybe it's the conviction in his voice. Maybe it's the use of Hawk's name. Maybe it's just pure luck. Either way, the feather hovering in front of his jugular drops away and floats back to Hawk's, slipping back into his wings. Hawks steps back, runs a hand through his hair. My apartment is bugged, he says. I suppose Mirko would let me sofa surf. Izuku slowly gets closer, grabs one of his business cards and holds it to him. I have another option if you're willing to blindly trust me. When the alarm blares, Shota stumbles from the bed, grabs his capture weapon and races out of the apartment. Hazashi is a few steps behind as they dart up the stairs and throw the roof access door open. Only to find the number 3 hero standing there with wide eyes. Hi, he says, too chipper, voice shaky. Moro's sent me. You're joking. Shota breathes and Hawks smiles, blonde hair a mess and red wings curled tight to his back. Nope. Oh, and Moro said that Nedzu is going to get a present from him. We're all going to die, Hazashi whispers and Shota is exhausted enough to snort and wonder if praying would be enough to save them. Nedzu stares at the email in front of him with glee. Not only is it beautifully worded, but the attachments are also very eye-opening. Pages and pages of HPSC documents outlining unlawful arrests to cover-ups to hidden child soldier programs. There is also Hawk's file along with Todoroki Tuya and Rei's complaints about Endeavor, along with a pointed page about a certain Lady Nagant currently residing in Tartarus. The late-night phone call from Yamada about housing the number 3 hero now makes more sense. Nedzu sips his tea and grins at the laptop screen in front of him, baring sharp teeth. Oh, Moro's, he says to himself. This is a wonderful present. Chapter text. Izuku blames Aoyama for the predicament he's currently in. He was too busy discussing the intricacies of cheese. After the cryptic message in first year, Izuku may have fallen down a rabbit hole of cheese and now knows too much about the subject, that when the bell rang for the end of the day, he wasn't fast enough to escape the hot hand gripping his wrist. There's a second when he contemplates jumping out of the window. Let's go, Deku, Katsuki hisses and Izuku could pull away. He could easily flip Katsuki and then jump out of the window. But he's tired. He's trying to find Mustard, working out a plan to take on the Meta Liberation Army before they can ever think of joining the League, emailing Nedzu about the commission, emailing David Shield to stop him from making the Quirk amplifying device, researching the whereabouts of Humorize to help Rhodey's soul and trying to find Muscular. The emails have been sent and Nedzu should be handling the Hawks and Lady Nagant situation, but Izuku is tired. So tired. Izuku lets himself be dragged outside, waving off Aoyama's protests. They can discuss cheese later. Katsuki pulls him all the way out of school, down a few streets before ending up in an alleyway. Izuku stands between two dumpsters and keeps his attention firmly on Katsuki. As much as he'd die for this boy, he knows he can be dangerous when he wants to be. What the is going on, shitty nerd? He asks, all anger and volume. Izuku blinks at him. What do you want, Katsuki? He asks, digging his fingernails into his palms. There's silence and Izuku cautiously looks up to see burning red eyes staring intensely at him. He continues to simply blink at him. The silence grows thicker. Izuku sighs. What do you want? He repeats. What the happened to you? Katsuki asks, waving at him with one hand while the other pops explosions. After that shitty villain you're different. Weird different. Izuku rolls his eyes. Thanks. Is that all? That's what I mean. He snaps. Where the has this attitude come from? The urge to say, your mum, is a strong one but he resists. Barely. I have no idea. Stop. Just stop. Katsuki hisses and the emotion there, the faint waver in his voice has Izuku straightening. What the is going on? Why the air you, like this? Izuku doesn't really know what to say. There's nothing he can say that will encapsulate what he's gone through, the reason why he's like this. Telling Katsuki he watched all of his friends die will probably have the other boy hit him and stalk off, demanding he go to a mental hospital. Considering the amount of death he's seen, Izuku could probably do with some psychiatric help. He definitely has PTSD. But asking someone to help him isn't feasible. I don't know what you want me to say, Izuku settles on, leaning back against the wall. I'm different, so what? Why do you care? What does that mean? Izuku takes a long moment to summon patience and then says, we're not friends, are we, Katsuki? Seeing his former best friend flinch isn't satisfying. It actually makes Izuku hurt, his heart races, hands twitching with the need to make sure Katsuki is fine. The last time Izuku didn't check in, Katsuki died. Katsuki only stares at him though. The popping of explosions has abruptly stopped. What? Izuku asks, voice small. We're not, are we? You make that abundantly clear. You don't like me. In fact, you bully me. Quite frequently actually, but considering I'm no longer using myself as a human shield to the other kids, I'm not getting bruises as often. Mum is so pleased she doesn't have to keep refilling the first aid kit. It's underhanded and pointed but needed. Before, Izuku let Katsuki walk all over him until Yue, where he grew a backbone and Katsuki mellowed out, apologized, became better. Izuku does not have the time to try and fix Katsuki. It won't help. He's stubborn and bull-headed and aggressive. The only way he'll change is if he wants to. I don't. Katsuki breathes and then rolls his eyes. You're just. Izuku grabs him, flips him over his shoulder and presses a knee between his shoulder blades, keeping his hands pressed to Katsuki's wrists to reduce the risk of explosions. Not that he needs to. Katsuki is still beneath him. I'm not useless or worthless or a Deku, Katsuki, he whispers, but his voice is laced with venom. He's fought a war and survived. Against the odds, Izuku was one of the lone survivors. Midoriya Izuku, survivor. Midoriya Izuku, victorious. He slowly stands, steps away, and Katsuki is quick to push himself up, larger explosions popping from his palms. Yet he doesn't step closer to Izuku. No, he instead watches him, as if Izuku is a wild animal to be feared. There is something burning in those red eyes, something wary and concerned. You're not Deku, Katsuki says, and Izuku rolls his eyes, grabs his fallen bag. No, he says, I'm not Deku, Katsuki. Either use my name or leave me alone. He walks away, chest aching. Part of him is relieved that Katsuki isn't following him. The other half aches so much it's hard to breathe. Leaving him behind makes his hands shake. The last time he left, not by choice, he came back to a dead body and a grinning villain. That day, his whole world broke apart. In a matter of seconds, Izuku lost all hope. It died along with his friend. There was so much that hadn't done yet, so much they hadn't seen. Before the after, they would spend their nights huddled together, haunted by their nightmares if the other wasn't there to fight them away. Izuku remembers how he'd curl into Katsuki's side, pulled closer by his constant warmth. In those moments, they would speak about everything and anything. The day's events, the news, Class 1A's drama and mischief, their dreams and fears and ambitions. Katsuki never once gave up on his dream to be the #1 pro hero, even if that meant he'd be fighting Izuku or Todoroki or Yaoyorozu for the spot. In those moments, Izuku had never felt closer to a person. Katsuki's heart beneath his ear, his arm wrapped around his back, his fingers playing with Izuku's crooked ones. In those moments, the future seemed infinite. They would survive the war and they would return to Yue and they'd become pro-heroes. Maybe they would drift closer, maybe it wouldn't be these brief moments shared behind closed doors and instead be something brighter, louder. Maybe Izuku would never have to sleep alone again, maybe he'd spend every morning waking to Katsuki's snores. If Katsuki hadn't died, if the after never happened. Well, Izuku doesn't like to think about what could have been. Katsuki is still alive, but the longer Shigaraki and All for One are out there, the bigger the chance Katsuki will yet again end up dead. Izuku doesn't think he could handle his death twice. A little boy with big eyes offers his hand to his best friend. His best friend with spiky hair takes it with a grin. His oldest friend, his best friend, reduced to bone and blood, frozen in time, never to take another breath. A boy with big eyes offers his hand to his friend. His friend with spiky hair swats it away angrily. Izuku thinks if he has to find Katsuki's dead body again, he would not be strong enough to keep fighting. A teenage boy with spiky hair offers his childhood friend a hand. His childhood friend with big eyes only stares at it and walks away. Izuku goes home and puts off his nightly patrol. His hands are shaking too much, his chest too tight. He passes out with the image of Katsuki's dead body burned into his retina. David Shield stares at his inbox and raises his eyebrows. There are instructions at the end of the email, and as suspicious as it all is, David follows them. After getting a secure line, the phone connects and the person on the other end of the line says in Japanese, "Hello. Principal Nedzu speaking." David is more than a little confused. "Hello. I'm David Shield." He starts to respond in English, but he's interrupted by Nedzu, as in, Principal of UA Nedzu, replying in English. "All Might's partner. Yes, I've heard of you. I have received an email informing me that I shouldn't build one of my inventions. It was signed by Moros and said to call you if I had queries." "Ah," Nedzu says. "If Moros tells you not to, I suggest following his instructions." "Why? How could he even know?" "I have no idea," Nedzu says, sounding delighted. "But he has been more than helpful and always knows when and where his assistance is required. Do not build your invention, Mr. Shield." David has questions but has no idea how to ask. So, he instead says, "I heard Toshinori will soon be working for you." "Ah, yes, a new addition to my staff. Not my first choice, I will admit, but the commission wants him to find a protege." The invention was to ease his worry over that, David explains, quietly. He wouldn't have to rush his choice. A brief silence. "That sounds like a dangerous invention in the wrong hands, Mr. Shield. I assume that's why Moros is suggesting you don't make it." "But Toshi will find his protege," Nedzu interrupts. "I believe Sir Night-Eye already has a choice in mind. One I approve of. Years of research down the drain because of one simple person." Yet David feels compelled to listen. Maybe it's because this person has Nedzu vouching for him. Maybe it's because only David knew about his invention and yet Moros now knows. Somehow. "Thank you, Nedzu," David says. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Shield." David puts the phone down. He stares at his designs and archives them. He'll bring them up to Toshinori, but before that, he'll heed the warning. "Melissa," he calls into the adjoining labs. "We're going out. Dinner's on me." Multiple hero agencies in Europe receive the same information about the Humorize cult in Uthen. There's information about their ideology, and their leader, Fleck Turn. The other branches looking into the cult in 25 cities also get this information. Within a week, investigations start up, and by the end of the month, the cult is disbanded with multiple members being arrested and the kidnapped scientists are freed. The trigger bombs, still being built, are quickly taken apart. Eddie Soul goes home to his children and sobs as he holds them. Rhodey won't have to worry about providing for his younger siblings anymore. Not now their father is safe and alive. Tsutsumi Kana has no idea how long she's rotted in this Tartarus cell. All she knows is the occasional scream, the occasional shuffle, and then silence. No one visits her. No one would want to. Not after the commission made sure she was nothing. Her usefulness was gone, and so, now, was she. She misses fresh air, misses trees, misses being amongst people. The days are long, but the nights are longer. Sometimes she wonders if she could twist her bound arms enough to be able to shoot herself. Not even to kill, just to injure, just to feel something for a change. But she can't move, and so she sits. Day in, day out. And then someone opens her cell door. A man with long, black hair and a jumpsuit walks in with what looks like a large, white rat with scarring over one eye on his shoulder, holding onto the winding, white scarf around his neck. Another man wearing an old-school tan gas mask and a stereotypical cowboy getup follows along. Then guards. Tsutsumi Kana. The rat speaks. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Principal Nedzu." "Hi," she croaks, voice raw from disuse. "I'm guessing the commission needs someone dead." The rat, Nedzu, laughs as the man's eyes flash a brief, startling red. "No," Nedzu says, paws clasping together. "You are no longer owned by them. Just like your protege, Hawks is no longer owned by them. Kana stills, stares at them. She's no longer the Commission's. And neither is Hawks. Which means Hawks finished his program. He's a hero now and he's alive. He's alive. What? She hisses. You're being released, the man says. You'll be under UA's protection, after some paperwork is signed. At her narrowed eyes, Nedzu waves her off. Oh, it's not a contract. Paperwork to ensure both your and our safety. You're being released from Tartarus. We can't have this backfiring on us, not when the public only know you as dangerous. And who do I have to thank for this? She asks as the guards shuffle over to undo her bounds. Moros, the man says. He found some interesting information and decided to share. At her side glance to the cowboy, the man shakes his head. He's currently a wanted vigilante. Soon to be labeled villain now that he's turned on the Commission. Nedzu says and then shrugs. No bother. If he needs it, he'll always have protection within UA. God help us all, the cowboy mutters and Kana can't stop the laugh. Her arms are free and when she stands, she's shaky but the man offers her an arm, and she gladly takes it. She takes a few hesitant steps, letting feeling wash over her. Pins and needles and sweet relief. They open the door to her cell and begin the walkout when she says, no Quirk handcuffs. That's why I'm here, the man says and offers nothing else. See this as an olive branch, Tsutsumi-san. Nedzu says, looking over the man's head to smile a truly chilling smile at her. We're trusting you to not immediately murder us. And I'm trusting you to get me out, she says, and he nods. When the paperwork is signed, when she's back in her usual sleeveless dress and heavy-duty boots, purple hair tied up, when she's stepping out into the open air, feet on solid ground, she cries. Hot tears pour from her cheeks and she hastily tries to wipe them away. And when she sits in the back of their car, running calloused hands over smooth leather, when she walks onto UA grounds and spots a familiar pair of red wings, bigger now, broader, she can't stop her blubbering. Hawks has started to flutter over, looking nervous and he's a man now but she will always remember the boy he was, will always remember Takami Kago, so scared but so compliant. Everything okay? The cowboy asks and she smiles, practically beams at him. I'm free, she whispers, stepping forward to collapse into a tight, warm embrace. I'm free. I am going to marry Moro's chat. From I hate endeavor. I want it known that I started this because I need everyone to know I am marrying him. T.S. From Copycat. But have you considered I want him? From Sleepycat. Same. I will fight you for him. From I hate endeavor. You will lose. T.S. From Copycat. Ooh, this just got interesting. It's a cold day, the sky filled with rain clouds and a harsh breeze, when Izuku, sat at home going through his homework and watching his mum watch the news, finally gets somewhere. Ever since the Commission released a statement explaining new evidence regarding Lady Nagant, the media has been talking about it. Constantly. Especially with both Nagant and Hawks spotted in UA. Mum keeps shooting him looks and Izuku is simply ignoring them. He wasn't the one that made it happen. He only helped it along. He sits writing out his English homework with ease, he's fluent, when his laptop pings. He grabs it with his unoccupied hand, still scribbling away and sends his screen a quick glance. Only to freeze. Gasuho Kurai, 12 years old, Quirk. Able to generate a typhoon of sleep-inducing gas. Mustard. Izuku has found mustard, and he's only 12. Izuku scans the document hastily, homework long forgotten as he takes in the new foster date. He doesn't originally live in Musudafu, hence why it was so hard to find him, and has only recently been placed into the system due to. Izuku's blood turns to ice as he looks over the hospital reports and his heart drops to his stomach. He pulls the laptop onto his lap and turns to his email inbox and messages from Elysium, scrolling through until he can find Aizawa's last plea to talk. He selects his name and starts to type. Before he sends the message, he pauses and then adds in a note about a possible parent being a good person to look after him considering their similar quirks. Izuku adds it because he knows Aizawa is currently housing both Shinso and Eri. Adding another traumatized child to the mix not be the best bet. He sends the message and then turns back to his homework, staring at it. Mustard was only there at the training camp. He was imprisoned later on and Izuku doesn't know what happened to him during the war, during the after, but he knows his past now. He thinks of the Todoroki siblings and how only one of them became a villain. He thinks of Shinso's past, his villainous parents, and Toga's, thinks of Monoma sitting atop that roof, of Aoyama being forced to do what he's doing. He thinks of his own past. Absent father, quirkless diagnosis, extensive bullying. Could he have been pushed to villainy if his dream of becoming a hero wasn't so strong? If child Izuku knew how it would end, would he still fight so hard? Right now, he's not a hero and he doubts he wants to become one. He doesn't have the time to train and push himself when he needs to save their lives. He's Moro's, a hero to those he saves, a vigilante to the media and a villain to the commission. Izu, honey, Mum calls. He looks up and finds her looking at him with concern. Is everything okay? He swallows. Yeah, he says, voice cracking, and she's pulling him into her arms in seconds. He collapses against her. He wasn't there when the apartment block was crushed. He wasn't there when the death toll rose and rose and rose. He was only there when All Might and Aizawa pulled him into a room, Aizawa activating his quirk as All Might told him they had found his mum's body. Maybe that's why he can look at her and hold her without completely breaking down. Maybe that's why, when she wraps her arms around him, he pushes his face into her neck and whines. It's okay, baby, she whispers. I'm so proud of you. So proud. He's started shaking. She presses a kiss to his temple. I'm scared, he whispers into her shoulder. I'm scared I'm going to mess everything up. Mum holds him tighter. I want to tell you so long as you're doing something, that's all that matters, she tells him. I want to tell you to stop worrying. I want to tell you everything is going to be okay. But I think you'd prefer Hisashi's advice. Which is? He asks, sniffling. Fear will only limit your potential. Do not let your own ambition stop you. She pulls back and Izuku meets her own watery, green eyes. You have your father's brains and my heart, Izuku. You are the best parts of the both of us. Izuku wipes his eyes, says, I don't know if I want to be a hero. Her eyes flash with surprise but she smiles all the same. Okay, baby, what do you want to do? I still want to go to UA but, General Ed. He speaks. If I do want to be a hero I can try at the sports festival. Are the general education admissions the same as the hero course? He shakes his head. No physical exam. Okay then, she says, agreeably. Whatever you want to do, I'll support you. I love you. I love you too, he says and releases the grip he has on her. They both step back and she goes back to the kitchen. Izuku sits down, stares at his laptop and then at his homework. He focuses on the paragraph he was writing. When Nimori gets the call, she's confused and then panicked. Shota rarely calls, let alone messages, so she's quick to pick up. When Shota tells her she's needed at the hospital, she nearly has a heart attack. Fear and dread curl in her gut. If Shota's calling, then something must have happened to Hisashi and she can't handle his death. Not after the pain of Oboro still lingering like an open wound. Hospital, she croaks, grabbing her glasses and bag, hands shaking so hard she nearly drops the phone. It must be the obvious, the panic in her voice, because Shota is quick to say, no one is injured or dying. It's complicated but you're probably going to need your emergency fostering license. She pauses at that, one shoe on, the other off. What? I think I heard you wrong, Sho. You didn't, he huffs. Just come down here and see for yourself. We're in the pediatric ward, the room is under Gasaho. With that he hangs up and Nimori spends a good few minutes staring at her shoeless foot before slipping it on. She makes sure she looks somewhat presentable, grabs her bag and license, and then leaves for the hospital. 20 minutes later, she's staring at a boy and feeling the strong urge to commit murder. Lots of murder. Very violent murder. The boy has short, wavy, light brown hair that comes down to his chin, tan skin, and deep brown eyes, one of which is completely bruised up. His lip is split, and his arm is in a cast. He's curled up on his hospital bed, blanket pulled up to his chin, and he looks terrified. Absolutely terrified. There is no social worker waiting for him because he won't be released. Not for a few more days. Not with the state his bruised ribs are in. According to the doctors, he's lucky to be alive. Shota hands over his phone and Nimari scans through it, eyes widening more and more as she reads on. When she hands his phone back, he asks, rhetorically, "You'll take him?" "Find me a nurse," she says and then knocks before slowly stepping in. Big, petrified eyes stare at her and he starts to shake. She raises her hand slowly and says, "Easy, I'm Kayama Nimari. You might know me as Midnight. Pro Hero Midnight." He jerks, clearly knowing who she is, and his face flushes but the fear has vanished. She breathes a sigh of relief. "Why are you here?" he asks, bluntly, sharply. "I've been considering fostering a kid for a while now," she lies. Sure, she loves children. She wouldn't have been a teacher if she hated them, but she's always considered herself an independent woman. No need to tie herself down with marriage or children. She wonders what Emmy will say when their date nights abruptly stop. Why would? Gasuho snaps upright and then flinches, letting out a hiss of pain. She's there, beside him, in seconds, hands hovering, unwilling to touch if he doesn't want her to. "Easy," she repeats. "Your ribs are bruised." He groans as he settles and then stares at her. "You want me?" he asks, quietly. "Why?" He sounds so small it hurts her. "Do you know what my quirk is?" she asks instead of answering him and he nods. She continues, "When I was your age, people didn't like me. They said my quirk was weird and strange. They were even worse to my friend, who can erase quirks. They called him villainous. His own parents put him in foster care." She wouldn't speak about Shota like this if she didn't know he would be alright with it. As it is, all of them, Hazashi and Tensai included, agreed that sharing this type of information was okay so long as it allowed trust to be built. Sometimes people in pain need to know they aren't alone. She smiles at him, a soft one, a small one. "If you don't want to be my foster kid, that's completely fine. Or you can stay with me for a few days, weeks, months and decide it isn't a good fit, that's okay too. But my quirk is like yours and I won't let anyone hurt you like this. Never again. I swear on my friend's grave." Big eyes stare at her with something akin to wonder. "You swear it?" he asks and she nods, holds up her pinky finger. "Swear it." Slowly, he lifts his own bruised hand to hers and links their pinkies together. "You can call me Kurai," he says, and her smile softens. "You can call me Nimari." Later, when Shota comes back with his sleeping bag to offer it to her, and Kurai is asleep, she asks, "How did you know about him?" Behind him, Hazashi coos at the boy before saying, "How do you think?" Moro's again. She breathes and then rolls her eyes. "I know you think his quirk is stealth-related, but have you considered some sort of foresight?" "Tsukauchi has it noted down," Shota replies. His eye bags look deeper but he seems happier, lighter. "Aries said he could see the future." "Nedzu has given you the week off," Hazashi explains, looping his arms around Shota's waist, dropping his chin on his shoulder. "It should cover him staying here for monitoring and then a couple of days for him to acclimatize." "How are yours doing?" she asks, always curious about her niece and nephew. "Therapy is helping," Shota says, relaxing back against Hazashi. Eri but she's coping a little better. Hitoshi is still somewhat reluctant to trust us. Keigo is sleeping on our couch, Hazashi says with a laugh. Shota rolls his eyes. Ishiyama is constructing both Keigo and Tsutsumi an apartment for them to stay on school grounds, but he likes our couch. He's practically nesting. Nimari smiles. It's been chaotic these last few months with Moro's dropping onto the scene and promptly changing everything. But as she looks at her new son's face, she wouldn't try to stop it from happening. "We're going to look after him," Shota says, seeing her look. Ever since Oboro, their bond has grown stronger, past the point of simple protectiveness. They can't lose anyone else. "We're going to look after all of them," Hazashi echoes and Nimari nods. She has a son now and she's willing to fight for him. The day after Izuku sends that message about Mustard, he receives his own about Toga. Dabi wants to meet and assures he'll bring Toga with him. After school, ignoring the kicked puppy looks Katsuki once again sends him, Izuku heads home, puts his gear on and then heads out to the beach. Once he gets there, he sees Dabi hiding behind a sand dune, staring at the sand with visible disdain. Beside him, Izuku sees a younger Toga Himiko. Blonde buns piled top on her head, bangs framing her face and golden eyes. She's dressed in her usual schoolgirl outfit, but there's a shift to the way she stands, and as Izuku gets closer he realizes what's different about her. She's practically emaciated. Her wrists are thin, her cheekbones and collarbones visible, and there's a shake to her hands, a mild tremor. She's starving. Hey, he greets as he approaches and then holds out his wrist. If you swear not to turn into me, I'll let you drink. She pauses mid-bounce over, eyes wide. What? She asks, and even Dabi is staring at him like he's crazy. I'm Moros, he says. You're Toga Himiko. Blood Quirk, right, you must be starving. He lifts his wrist higher. You have my permission to drink. She looks so unsure and panicked that Izuku shifts his jacket up and takes one of his knives to his wrist. A simple prick of pressure, and then blood is welling up. He holds his wrist out to her. I trust you not to kill me, he says, honestly. I trust you not to turn into me. You're starving, Toga, drink. It might be the sight of it. It might even be the sharp metallic smell. Either way, between blinks, she's got his arm in a firm grip. Are you? Dabi starts and Izuku nods. Absolutely, he agrees, and then sharp fangs are cutting through his skin into the meat of his wrist. It's a quick burst of pain, a low ache as he slowly sits in the sand, Toga quick to follow, drinking greedily. This wasn't the plan, he only wanted to meet her. But he can't let her starve, even when knowing what she's capable of. He remembers the day Asui and Uraraka died. It's a vivid memory, one that left Izuku reeling as his green lightning flickered across his body. Uraraka was holding up a building as other heroes got the civilians out and to safety. Asui was acting as her guard. Izuku doesn't know what disguise Toga was wearing, but it must have been one of their friends to get so close. All he remembers is the guttural scream as Asui had her throat slit, choking on her blood. He had turned, fear freezing his veins, only to find a bloody, grinning Toga as she licked Asui's blood from her fingers. Uraraka had stared, too shocked to notice the knife leaving Toga's hand and slipping between ribs. The building had fell. Izuku remembers Yamada hovering as the dust cleared and their bodies were found. He was once again placed on suicide watch. By then, there was a very small group of them left. Tokiyami, Shinso, Monoma, Yaoyorus, Hawks, Yamada, Eri and himself. Some were lost to dust. Others burnt. Izuku doesn't think he'll ever get Asui's scream, the look on Uraraka's face, out of his mind. Hey! Someone clicks their fingers in front of his face and he jerks back. Turquoise eyes and dead skin stapled to healthy fill his vision. Dabi, you good? Yeah, he says and blinks at where Toga is standing a few meters away, wringing her hands. What happened? I'm sorry, she shouts. I didn't mean to take too much. I'm really sorry, I was just really hungry. He groans as he stands, finding his muscles aching. Definitely pushing it on the blood loss as his vision swims, but he's steady on his feet. Patrolling is out of the question though. He can already tell he's going to sleep like a baby when he gets back. It's fine, he assures Toga. I don't want you to starve or feel bad about your quirk. He points at her. It's not villainous. There's no such thing as a villainous quirk. She blinks at him and then runs forward to throw her arms around his shoulders. He staggers back. Okay, so maybe the blood loss might be worse than he thought, and finds warm hands gripping his shoulders to stop him from falling on his ass. You don't think I'm a villain? She asks, golden eyes flooded with tears. No, he says, honestly, because she's not the Toga he knows. This Toga is somewhere between civilian and villain. I've killed someone, she says, quietly. So have I, he says, repeating what he told Dabi. I killed a couple of child abusers. You killed someone because you've been starved. Which, we're going to fix. How? Dabi drawls. Are you going to be her personal blood bag? I'd be happy to help, Izuku hits back. But no, there are specialized blood banks for people with blood quirks. Some take an ID but others you can walk into, for example if you're homeless or hiding from an abusive partner. Toga pulls back and stares at him. Those exist. He nods. I can understand why you wouldn't have heard about them. They're quite quiet considering the less than pleasant views on certain quirks. But they exist. Golden eyes flick between Izuku's before looking up at Dabi. Izuku can feel the older man sigh. Where are they? He asks and Izuku smiles. He pushes Toga away so that he can rifle through his pockets. He grabs a piece of paper he wrote the locations on last night and hands it over to her. Some of the locations have named specific people, whether money is needed or an ID, even times to go best to avoid detection. Toga looks to the piece of paper with his chicken scratch and starts crying. Oh, Izuku's hands flail, but before he can panic, she's once again in his arms. Thank you, she whispers, and there's no mania in her voice, no forced cheeriness. Just plain relief and gratitude. Of course, he says, slowly hugging her back. He thinks he'll always see her killing his friends with that wide, shark's grin. But this isn't that version of Toga Himiko. Not yet, at least. This is a traumatized teenager, who has only ever been shunned. Izuku knows what that feels like. I have other good news, he tells her gently. She hums, refusing to let go. Your cousin, Monoma, is looking for you. He's really worried. Toga pulls back, eyes wide. What? Nae is worried. I found him on a rooftop, Izuku says, and then reaches for her when it looks like she's going to bolt. Dabi is there a second later, pale hand dropping to her head. He's fine. He's okay. He's just worried about you. I'm not expecting you to do anything about it, but you should. More hugs. If someone told Izuku in the after that he'd be hugging known serial killer Toga, he would have laughed in their face and worried that they were losing their mind. Yet here he is, hugging her. Willingly. Izuku lifts his head to find Dabi smirking at him. I see you've made a friend, he says, lowly, and Izuku curls up his fingers where his hand is wrapped around Toga to flip him off. How's the family? He asks, and Dabi rolls his eyes, but there is no tensing, no sudden anger, no spark of blue flame. I don't think they'd. The sky is purple and I'm an idiot. Izuku interrupts. When Toga shifts to look at him, along with Dabi's head tilt, Izuku shrugs. What? I thought we were bullshitting each other. Toga breaks off into a cackle while Dabi glares at him. Still no blue flame, no quick temper. It seems with endeavor put away, Dabi's somewhat mellowed. Not that Izuku isn't still wary of these people. He knows what they can become, and he will never forget the way they murdered his friends. Uraraka and Asui. The blood. The building collapsing in a rush of noise. Todoroki's scream as Dabi wouldn't stop burning until there was nothing left of his friend but a pile of ash and smoke. You have 3 months until school starts up, Izuku says. Don't waste it. Is that a threat? Dabi drawls, but there's no heat, just mild curiosity. I will drop you off at their doorstop, Izuku says, smile hidden by his mask. Dabi rolls his eyes and Toga laughs. Izuku rolls his shoulders, cracks his neck. Right, he says. I think I'm going to go and sleep for 15 hours. Dabi, be reasonable with your arson and visit your family. Toga. Himiko, she says. We're friends now, Moros. Okay. Izuku agrees. Himiko, go and get some blood, and if you want, visit your cousin so he knows you're alive. And then Izuku pauses. He stares at her. She stares back. What? Dabi mumbles, hands flexing. I'm guessing your parents are shitty, Izuku says, slowly. Himiko tilts her head, nods. Do you want a good listen, he's a bit of an idiot but he does care, a good father. Himiko freezes and then looks down. I don't think he'd like me very much, what with? He's got a blood quirk. Izuku interrupts, lightly, and if he's more of an idiot than I thought, there's 3 other people I trust. For a long second, she shuffles, not meeting his eyes, and then she nods. If he, then she's throwing herself at him again. Izuku, despite it all, holds her back and feels good about it. This may be a dangerous soon to possibly be serial killer, but Izuku only wants to help. He wants these people to grow, to get better, to be better. Get Dabi to give you my number and I'll set up a meeting with him, he says, and she nods. When she finally releases him, He bids his goodbyes and ignores Dobby's comment about him being a little emo. He's the emo. Has he seen himself? He walks back to his apartment, mindful of the dizziness and need to be elusive. He's a few blocks away, on a rooftop, when he spots something white and thin dancing in his peripheral vision. He stills, fearing he'll have to face Aizawa this early on. But as he turns, the fear morphs into something more instinctual. Tall and muscular, black hair and a flat face, a white bandana and a torn, white scarf, knives and katanas strapped to him. Stain. Stain is a few roofs over. Now Izuku could very easily go home. He's seen him, he knows he's in Musudafu. He should rest, sleep away the blood loss, and then hunt down Stain when he's much more capable. But something makes him watch him. He can remember watching Iida get cut down by Stain during the war. One of the first deaths after Katsuki and Kirishima. Stain had always got what he wanted eventually. Red eyes meet green. Well, guess Izuku is going to have an annoying talk, probably a fight. He jumps over to the next rooftop, closer to Stain, who simply watches his approach like a lion watches an antelope straying too far from the herd. Not that Izuku lets it bother him. He's faced scarier villains than Stain. He lived through the after. What is it that you want? Stain asks when Izuku is close enough. Maybe it's the blood loss. Maybe it's the way his vision has started to blur. Maybe it's remembering Iida's face as he collapsed into a pool of his own blood. Izuku doesn't know why he says it, only that he does. All Might is a terrible person, and you should probably idolize someone who isn't a quirkist. Stain stares at him. Izuku stares back. Should there be black spots in his vision? Probably not. He feels a little cold too. Maybe when he goes home, he can curl up next to the radiator and sleep until his alarm. All Might is a true hero. He leaves kids on rooftops. Izuku interrupts. Is Stain moving slightly or is Izuku swaying? Actually, what are your thoughts on quirks? Do you think the quirkless are useless? Do you believe there are villainous quirks? Red eyes don't look away. Quirks are quirks. They are tools we can utilize or ignore. A quirkless person is like anyone else. Izuku smiles, perking up. Oh cool, you're not an asshole. That's rare these days, you know. All Might is quirkist, though, so maybe pick someone better. All Might, as a good hero, Izuku agrees, as the world around him darkens slightly. Don't get me wrong, he's good at saving people with a smile. But he's completely ruined hero society by giving the public hope in relying on just one hero. That's impossible and counterproductive. It tells heroes they can do things alone, which isn't true. I mean, that's how you're able to pick off most of them, right? Izuku pauses and then points. He thinks he's pointing at his shoulder more than him, but it doesn't matter. Not cool, by the way. You don't like the idea of cleansing society to make it better? Stain asks and he seems oddly attentive. Izuku shakes his head. The world starts spinning. Sounds a bit too close to genocide, which isn't good at all. We need heroes working together and striving to be better. That is why training children to fight wars isn't right. They're kids, you know. Everyone wants to be a hero because of the propaganda, but then it's all bloodshed and dead people and fighting assholes who aren't actually assholes, most of them are just desperate. What is your plan then, little hero? Not a hero. Moros, Izuku idly corrects. My plan is making sure heroes know they need to work together. Sort out the problem from within. All Might will retire soon and thank Endeavor can't get the #1 title, but we need unity. Not destruction. Sometimes violence is necessary, but completely destroying something is redundant. Stain looks at him. You are not like the other non-believers, he says. You have ambition. Do you still like All Might? Izuku asks as the world keeps darkening. Are his words slurring? He doesn't know. I will need to do my own research into the matter, Stain says, and Izuku shrugs. Better than nothing. You know who I hate. Child killers and abusers. Overhaul. Endeavor. Muscular. And the doctor. Who are you? Izuku feels the world rush towards him, and he jerks away only to end up teetering on the edge of the roof. There's a brief moment of panic and a rush of calm. Izuku closes his eyes as he begins to fall, accepting his soon-to-be quick death as he blacks out. Chizome could let the random person fall. When he assumes it's a boy what with the height and build, first approached badmouthing All Might, he considered a quick slice of his sword to end the conversation there. One cut to his jugular and Moro's would be no more. But there is something about this vigilante. The way he talks with such conviction. The way he approached him with ease, no fear surrounding him. The way he agrees with his views, if altering a few of the extreme ones, even proposing new ones. It makes Chizome want to have a full discussion with him, to pick his brain. That's why he darts over and grabs the vigilante by the collar of his jacket before he can plummet to his death. Not the fact he sounds young, so young, too young. So much like a child, like a teenager that should be worried about exams and not villains. He pulls the person away from the edge, lays him gently on the rooftop and debates leaving. His pulse is steady even if there is a sluggishly bleeding bite mark on his wrist. A blood quirk feeding then but no signs of a struggle. A lone vigilante offering his blood and then approaching a known serial killer. It makes Chizome wonder if he's simply reckless. The youth can be so strong-willed at times, so unaware of how easily death can grab them, or maybe just suicidal. It wouldn't be the first suicidal person he's met. He doubts it'll be his last. But the person feels too determined. If he is suicidal, he has a plan he must follow beforehand. It's what has Chizome perching on the edge of the roof, surveying the world beneath him, with half of his attention focused on the vigilante laying behind him. Small but well-built, professionally designed gear but no labeling. Self-made then. Chizome doesn't know how long he sits there, only that the sun starts to dip, and he grows concerned about potential heroes finding his location. But as the sky bleeds from blue to light orange, the person wakes with a groan. Moro's hisses. Mental note. Sleep off the blood loss first. Good advice, Chizome says, watching as a head snaps up and the tense body relax. You stayed, he breathes, confused. You made some interesting points, he responds. He stands, towers over them but the vigilante doesn't flinch or cower. You have the potential to be a great hero, a true hero. Moro's laughs self-deprecatingly. I don't think I'm cut out for heroics but who knows. He slowly stands and then cautiously starts to walk around. When he's comfortable in his body, and not looking as if he'll collapse if a breeze hits him, he turns to Chizome. Thank you for listening to me and watching over me, Moro says and then gives him a sharp bow. Reaching into one of the pockets in his gear, he grabs a business card and hands it over to him. If you need anything, message me. With that done, he takes off running and leaping for the next roof. Chizome watches him land and feels a brief flicker of relief hit him before he shakes it off. He has heroes to hunt. He still tucks the business card between the bandages on his wrist. He might need it after all. Izuku goes home, takes off his gear, kisses his mum, shoves the meal she's made down his throat and then promptly passes out on his bed. Some nights, sleep evades him. Well, most nights, sleep evades him. His nightmares and dreams all revolve around his dead friends, the way they died, his last moments holding Eri. Some nights, he dreams of the good moments. Kaminari teaching Todoroki memes, Sato's triple chocolate cookies, Katsuki holding him as they sleep, Uraraka and Shiro tying Mineta up and floating him like a balloon, Jiro teaching them how to play the guitar, Shinso curled under multiple blankets with Aizawa's cats atop him. Those dreams are worse than any nightmare. Because he will never have that again. He can't. Not if he wants them alive. Sleep was never easy for him before. Too many nightmares about the USJ, about the training camp, about Shigaraki and All Might retiring. There were multiple nights when he couldn't sleep without someone there, making sure he was safe. It used to be Katsuki before. In the after, it was Todoroki before Dabi. Then it was Shinso, who probably worked on 5 hours a week for the whole after. He felt protected when someone else was there. Feeling someone else's warmth also contributed. Even with One for All, Izuku has always ran cold. But tonight, probably because of the blood loss, he is out like a light until he awoken to a sharp, shrill noise. He groans, trying to shut it off as his body feels lethargic. He aches and his head is filled with cotton. He hears creaking, shuffling. Mum appears by his bedside and turns the annoying noise off. A cool hand hits his forehead, and he hears her mumble, "Finally, a day off." Then he's been spoon-fed some warm soup before being laid back down. There, he closes his eyes and drifts again. No more nightmares or dreams. Just endless nothingness, suspended in time. The next time he wakes, sunlight is streaming in through his window and he's quick to dart to the bathroom. When he emerges, he finds Mum cleaning the kitchen as the news talks about some villain. Izuku is too busy staring at the clock. "I'm 5 hours late for school," he whispers, and his mum spins at his voice. "Izu," she calls and walks over, hand pressing against his forehead. "That's a better temperature. Why don't you make yourself comfy on the couch, honey?" Izuku stares at her uncomprehendingly. She gently nudges him over, drapes a blanket over him, from All Might's winter collection, all soft reds and warm yellows, and then bustles back to the kitchen. For the first time since before the war, before the after, his mind is quiet. He sits there, barely taking in the news as he slowly drifts in and out of consciousness. Mum makes sure he's having lots of fluids and he's feeling better than when he first collapsed. Just thinking of falling from a roof has his stomach swimming. He never wants to be that reckless again. He nearly lost everything because of it. And as if summoned by the thought of Izuku and rooftops and falling off them, a loud banging sounds at their door, Katsuki's voice screeching through, "Deku, open the ing door." Izuku makes eye contact with his mum. Sighs, "I'll get it before he breaks our door down." He ambles over, blanket hugged tight around his shoulders. Opening the door, he's faced with Katsuki still in his school uniform and a borderline feral look on his face. All scowling and teeth. "Hi," Izuku greets, leaning against the door frame as Katsuki scans him from head to toe. "What's up?" A hand darts forward, and it's years of knowing Katsuki when he's angry and when he's not that has Izuku not flinching. A warm hand hits his forehead, and he frowns at Izuku. "Are you sick?" he asks, removing his hand. Izuku nods. "Not enough fluids and staying up too late," he lies. Red eyes narrow. "Dumbass," Katsuki hisses between his teeth. "Take better care of yourself." "I'm trying," Izuku says, pulling the blanket tighter. "Why are you here?" "You weren't at school," Katsuki says, not meeting his eyes. Izuku blinks at him confused. And he speaks. He doesn't think Katsuki has ever tried to check up on him before. It's disorientating. It makes his heart hurt. "Nothing," Katsuki mutters. Whatever." He goes to step away and Izuku can't let it happen. He has the sudden need to understand what has led to Katsuki racing to his apartment the minute school is out. Izuku steps forward, shuts the door behind him and reaches out. A gentle, unscarred hand on a warm wrist. Katsuki freezes. His entire body is tense. "Why are you here?" Izuku asks as gently as he can. "It doesn't matter." "It does," Izuku corrects. "What do you want from me, Katsuki? I thought you didn't want me to chase you, but now you're. If you say I'm acting different, you need to look in a mirror." He interrupts, harshly, but there's no explosion to follow, no anger. He seems as tired as Izuku. "And I don't want you chasing after me like some shitty stalker." Izuku removes his hand. "Okay," he agrees. "I can do that." "No." Katsuki spins around, red eyes burning, tiny explosions popping from his hands. "What the is this? Since when did you roll over this easily?" "Katsuki, stop calling me that." Katsuki snaps, and there's still no anger, not really. His face is contorted into a grimace more than a scowl. Izuku blinks at him. You don't want me to call you by your name." "I just felt like Bakugo." Not that." Katsuki hisses, and the tips of his ears are becoming glaringly red. Almost as red as his eyes. "That dumb nickname." Izuku thinks maybe the blood loss is worse than expected. "You hate that name," he counters, slowly. "No, I don't," Katsuki mutters under his breath, refusing to meet his eyes. Not when it's you." Izuku is thrown back to their fight with Nine, when he told Katsuki giving him one for all was okay because it was him. No one else. Just him. Just them together. "Okay, Kachan," Izuku whispers and blinks at the sight of red flooding Katsuki's cheeks. It still doesn't explain why. I thought you'd done something reckless and stupid, Katsuki says. You're good at making those shit decisions. Can't take you anywhere. For a second, Izuku is still confused. And then it hits him. Before the sludge villain, Katsuki told him to take a swan dive off the roof. After that, Izuku pulled away. He became withdrawn and sullen, refusing to call Katsuki by the nickname he gave him and stopping all interaction. And then a week after their fight, Izuku doesn't come into school. Izuku looks at Katsuki with wide eyes, taking in his messy blonde hair, the panicked edge to his features, the way his explosions are disorganized as if he's having trouble controlling them. Izuku looks at Katsuki and realizes he's misjudged. Oh, he whispers and then slowly reaches for his wrist. A gentle squeeze and then he pulls at his hand until Katsuki's fingers can press against Izuku's steady, even pulse. He used to do this a lot at night, when Katsuki's own nightmares refused to let him sleep. Like then, it works like a charm. With the feeling of him alive beneath his fingers, Katsuki relaxes as if the weight of the world has been lifted from his shoulders. He doesn't apologize. It's not his fault he panicked Katsuki. But his heart hurts. He gently pulls his hand away. Wait here, Izuku says and opens the door to his apartment. He passes his mum, watching him curiously, and grabs one of his notebook, scrawls down his number, not the Moro's burner one, and then rips the page out. When he opens the door again, Katsuki is still waiting. Izuku holds out the piece of paper. Katsuki takes it, scans it, and raises his eyebrows. I'm fine, he says. But if you need to check in. I don't need to do anything, he snaps but still pockets his number. Izuku smiles. Katsuki has always been more reliable when it comes to his actions and not his words. I'll be there tomorrow, he promises and Katsuki nods. The French was complaining about his lack of a cheese partner. Katsuki narrows his eyes at Izuku. You let me deal with that shit alone and I'll kill you. Izuku rolls his eyes. Sure, Kachan. With no further words, only a meaningful look, Katsuki walks away. Izuku watches him retreat and then turns back into his apartment. There, he grabs his laptop and fires it up. He scrolls until he finds Aizawa's profile. He's once again asking for a place where they can talk. Izuku ignores this and types the information he knows about Himiko and then sends it off, asking for Vlad King to be there. Then he grabs his burner, already filled with messages from Himiko, and tells her about the meeting. Then he turns everything off and curls up on the couch, tugging the blanket so he's entirely covered by warmth. Kaminari would call him a burrito. Uraraka would coo at him. His heart hurts but it's a good type of pain. He's doing all of this for them and it's working. It's working. Everything okay, honey? His mum calls. Yeah, he calls back and it's the truth. With 3 months until school starts, he's doing okay. Dabi stares at the Todoroki household and frowns. He shouldn't be here, but Toga is meeting Moro's contact that could offer her a good home and... Well, Dabi doesn't want to admit he's lonely. He's survived this long by himself. But Toga is all loud screams and bright smiles, tight hugs, and a continuous presence. Without her by his side, bugging him, he feels empty. Having someone loud next to him means he doesn't have to think. With how up he is, not thinking is an improvement. Dabi doesn't think he belongs here, amongst them, pretending he's not a patchwork version of the brother they probably don't even remember. His staples itch and phantom pain flickers in the back of his mind. Dabi isn't Chuya anymore. Chuya died in the flames of his own creation. Dabi was born from those ashes. He hesitates, staring at the door when movement causes him to turn. White and red hair, cleanly parted down the middle. Heterochromia eyes blink at Dabi, confused and wary but not scared. Their family has only ever feared one person. What are you doing here? Shoto asks and Dabi should leave, should feign confusion or drunkenness or anything over than just standing here like a goddamn idiot gawking at his little brother. His littlest brother, a brother he once held that knot on his thumb when he was teething. Dabi stops. Mind blank and warring with itself. He should leave. He should definitely leave. He can tell Moros, who he is not scared of, shut up, that their meeting didn't go as planned and hope he doesn't get hunted down. But seeing Shoto, the object of his hatred for simply existing, burns. Because Shoto looks thin and tired. He's perfectly blank. Fuyumi grew quiet and Natsuo grew angry, but Chuya would try and be nothing, be moldable so the punches and burns didn't hurt as much. If Chuya was good, compliant, then he didn't go to sleep sobbing in pain. Chuya and Shoto seem more alike than Dabi ever considered, too blinded by his rage and fear and sadness. After all, he nearly died, and they moved on. Are you okay? Shoto settles on when Dabi still hasn't moved or spoken. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Dabi chokes out, your favorite color was white because you loved mother's hair. Shoto's blank face immediately freezes in place. How? You love to eat cold soba. Dabi says, quietly, and watch All Might on the TV. Mother used to watch the clock to make sure he wouldn't come home and see you. He always did hit harder when he saw that man on patrol. Shoto's frozen expression crumbles into disbelief. Wide eyes scan Dabi's face, his piercings, his eyes' black hair, the staples, the scars. Chuya, he whispers. Chuya, you're you. You thought fire could kill a Todoroki. He breathes and Shoto is lurching forward. He looks pained and angry and confused, and Dabi lifts a hand and drops it to familiar red and white hair. It's as soft as he remembers. Longer. Shoto is almost as tall as him. Will probably be taller like Natsuo. Chuya, he repeats, and Dabi pats his head. Come on, he says. I'm ready to come home. When he steps through the door, he hears his mother humming along to a song on the radio. Natsuo is grabbing plates while Fuyumi tastes some of the prepared food. When the door opens, mother says, that was a quick grocery trip, Shoto. Natsuo laughs and Fuyumi looks up and promptly drops the plate she was holding. His brother and mother snap their heads around to look at her and then follow her gaze to where Dabi still has his hand on Shoto's head. Sho, Natsuo starts, laughing nervously. Who's this? Chuya, mother whispers, eyes flooding with tears. A mother could never forget her one son's face. Especially not the face of someone she thought had died. Both of his siblings stare at her. Chuya, is that you? He swallows the lump in his throat. You know how much I like dramatic entrances, he says, and then she's darting towards him, thin arms curling around him. He freezes, unsure before he instinctively relaxes in her hold. She's freezing and yet it warms him. She warms him. His mother holds him, and it feels like every broken part of him is being stitched back together with her gentle hands. Hey, mother, he whispers into her hair, and she sobs, holding him tighter. Fuyumi is quick to follow mother and grab at him. Natsuo stares, and there's a familiar anger in his eyes, one that bleeds pain. Natsuo, in some ways, is too much like their father. You're alive, he says, bluntly, but Dabi can hear the waver there. Yes, he replies. It's not a pretty story, but I'll tell you if you want me to. Because he's back now and his brothers are close, and his sister is gripping him too tightly and his mother is sobbing. He's home. No father in sight. Natsuo meets his eyes. Will you leave again? He says, and his voice cracks and Dabi's frozen heart is cracking. No, he says, desperate and vulnerable in the face of his family. No, not if you want me. Natsuo ducks his head and then he's striding over, grabbing a lingering Shoto and bringing him into the hug that's slowly crushing Dabi. He ignores the pain of his staples, the strange feeling of so much skin contact, and relaxes into their hold. Later, he will tell them about waking up, about a man finding him and bringing him to a hospital. He'll talk about a children's hospital of pain and of waking from a coma to a new voice and new skin. He'll tell them about the flames licking at his fresh body as he burnt the hospital to the ground. He'll tell them about his years on the streets, of murder and lies and doing anything he could to keep living. He'll mention the hatred, the want to murder their father, to murder Shoto, and then he'll break down and sob in their arms, apologizing over and over for being weak and pathetic and useless. And they'll hold him, and Shoto will roll his eyes and casually mention how he hated his siblings because he could never see them. He'll talk of his own childhood of pain and isolation and that sadness burning into hatred. I would have been angry at me too, he'll whisper, and Dabi will grab the back of his neck, gently, and shake him. Don't ever say that, he'll hiss. Don't you dare. You were a kid, Sho. You still are. We have every right to hate him, but I should have never turned on you. Especially not for being abused like I was. And Shoto will blink tears from his eyes and Dabi will tell them about Moros and Shoto will laugh, and while everyone stares at this newfound emotion with surprise, he'll tell them about Moros asking for his permission. He'll open his palm as a small flame sits there and mention how it's his power. Not their father's, not even their mother's, his. We're going to have to make a gift basket, Fuyumi will say, and they will collapse in laughter. That night, the Todoroki household is lighter, warmer. Sekijiro has barely taken a sip of stolen coffee. If he races to the coffee maker in the staff room to ensure he has a full cup before Aizawa can chug all of it, he doesn't see the problem when Aizawa is approaching him. He doesn't look angry, per se, but then again, Aizawa always seems to default at a low level of anger. Aizawa, he greets, making eye contact as he sips his coffee. Con, Aizawa replies and then nods his head over to their private offices. A word. Sekijiro pauses. This can't be about coffee. Aizawa may love coffee enough to threaten murder, but he's never cornered him before. Which means something has happened. The worst possible thoughts race through his head. One of the students has been hurt. Something happened to Yamada. Maybe one of their new kids is hurt. He's so worried that he follows without hesitation. Aizawa leads him to his office, and when the door closes behind Sekijiro, he blurts out, "What's happening?" Aizawa leans back against his desk, facing him. "You know Moros?" he asks, and Sekijiro can feel some of his panic ease at the random question. "The new vigilante that drops kids off at your door and might also be a mass murderer." Aizawa rolls his eyes, crosses his arms over his chest. "Yes, that Moros. I assume Nimari told you why she wasn't in." Sekijiro nods, sipping his coffee. "Her new kid, Gasaho. Moros told us about him." Aizawa says, and Sekijiro feels like he's been led somewhere but has no idea where. "Last night, he mentioned a teenage girl that needs a home. She's a runaway and Moros has tried to help, but he's not equipped for her needs." Sekijiro blinks. The floor feels like it's giving way. "Are you implying that I am?" he asks, a little breathless. "Because I am not. I can barely look after these brats we teach." "You take care of Pencil," Aizawa counters. "Pig," Sekijiro corrects. "As I said, Pan is alive." "Pig," Aizawa nods. "That's what I said. Pig is a bulldog," Sekijiro says, slowly. "You're saying I should adopt a full-grown, probably traumatized teenage girl." Aizawa stares at him for a long moment and then says, "She was kicked out for her blood quirk." "Well, it seems he's been caught out." He narrows his eyes, runs his free hand through his gray hair. "When and where and who?" Aizawa smiles a slow and frankly terrifying grin. "Later this evening, outside of a homeless shelter. Her name is Toga Himiko." And so, 4 hours later, Sekijiro stands with Aizawa outside of a homeless shelter. It's light out and a few people are milling about, but the air is quiet, sullen. These are the people with nowhere else to go. Aizawa is quiet too, sharp eyes scanning their surroundings, chin dropped down into his capture weapon. Skidrio has swapped out his hero uniform for some jeans and a long-sleeved shirt while Aizawa still remains in his jumpsuit. Maybe practically it's smart, but Sekijiro hates it and doesn't have any problem telling him that. A voice speaks up from his elbow and Sekijiro spins around and looks down to find a girl standing there. Small, with 2 blonde buns on her head. Her eyes are golden, darting between him and Aizawa fearfully, and she's dressed in a dirty school uniform. "Vlad King and Eraserhead, right?" she asks, looking seconds away from bolting. "Moros said that I should look for a guy with a scarf." Aizawa rolls his eyes. "Do you know when I'm ever going to meet him?" The girl frowns up at him. "You haven't met him yet." She bounces, face splitting into a grin. "He's great. He let me feed off him, too, which is really kind and cool." "Toga Himiko?" Sekijiro asks and she nods, waves at him. "Hi, you need to feed off blood for your quirk?" he asks, as softly as he can, and her bouncing stops immediately. She drops her gaze, nods. It's called transform. If I drink enough of someone's blood, I can become them." She says, quietly, my parents thought I was weird and a freak because I really like blood and I'm always hungry. And I get it. I know it's creepy and I know I'm creepy and... Hey, Sekijiro says, dropping to a crouch in front of her so their eyes can meet. Red on gold. Do you know what my quirk is? She shakes her head. Moro said it was like mine. It is, he says. It's called blood control. I can manipulate my blood when it's left my body. She shuffles, still unsure. When I use it, afterwards, I get cravings, like you do. I need to replenish what I've lost. The kids at my school when I was younger. Aizawa snorts. Sekijiro flips him off without looking. Toga giggles. When I was younger, he continues. Everyone thought I was scary. Thankfully my parents had quirks like mine, but school was hell. That's why my hero name is Vlad King because that became my nickname. I was known as the Blooding Vampire. Slowly, he reaches out, takes a pale hand of hers and squeezes. Her golden eyes have turned glassy. I'm not, and neither are you. He tells her, our quirks aren't villainous or weird or creepy. They're ours. She stares and then throws herself at him. Sekijiro ends up on his ass, a teenage girl sobbing into his chest with a smug-looking Aizawa watching them. Sekijiro wraps an arm around her waist and places a hand on the back of her neck, holding her closer, tighter. She's small and skinny and he guesses the flush on her cheeks is from her recent feed. She needs proper meals and proper quirk help. Sekijiro is a teacher. He could help, but he's also been in her position before. He knows the pain of loneliness, of being the outcast. At least he had parents who supported him. Do you like dogs? He asks when her cries have quietened. She sniffles, nods. Aizawa looks so smug. Sekijiro considers punching him but that would displace the girl clinging to him. Maybe later. Good, he says and meets those black eyes. Do we need to go to your detective friend? I've killed someone. She jumps in before Aizawa can speak, voice small, body shaking. They'll take me too. You're a child, Aizawa interrupts. And, if what Moro said is true, you've been starved because of quirkism. You'll get community service that you can undergo at UA. If that's okay with you. She stares at him in wonder and then looks to Sekijiro. You really want me? She asks, quietly, and he nods. If you're happy to stay with me, then yes, I do. She starts crying again, repeating, thank you, over and over again. He holds her tighter, dropping his chin on her head. Welcome to the world of parenthood. Aizawa drawls and Sekijiro only glares at him in response. Another person joins Elysium. I am going to marry Moro's chat. From Blood Queen. Moro's would look prettier in blood and I'm going to fight all of you for him smiley face. Several people are typing. All for One sits amongst his many medical appliances and feels the presence of another person enter his room. Kurogiri kindly lets them through and then his portal closes. Good morning Aoyama. All for One greets, tone jovial. How has your schooling been coming along? Bon, he says, calm and easy. It is a rundown school, truly repugnant but it is a school. How is Izuku doing? There's a pause. All for One tilts his head. Aoyama wouldn't pause unless something was wrong. Aoyama, he is doing très bien mais. Aoyama shuffles on his feet. I think he is going through a breakup. All for One thinks if he still had his eyes, they would be popping out. What? His heart is broken, le boss. Aoyama wails. He's so déprimé. It's taken weeks for him to open up and Bakugo stares and tries to get his attention, but Midoriya turns his affections away. All for One chokes. His mind is whirring. Bakugo. As in, Bakugo Katsuki, their neighbor. As in the boy with an explosion quirk. Bakugo Katsuki and Izuku. He asks, voice faint to his own ears but Aoyama nods, throwing his arms around. Bakugo is trying to win his heart back. Aoyama sighs. Jeune amour. And what led you to these findings? All for One asks, feeling oddly faint. He only wanted to know if his son was healthy. As much as he loves this new version of Izuku, the cold-blooded villain, he needs him to be safe. He's not afraid to lock him away like he did with Yoichi. But here he is, his son, and Bakugo Katsuki. He thought Izuku would have better standards. My classmates told me they were childhood friends, d'accord, but that after his quirkless diagnosis they fell apart. Neonmoins, Midoriya would follow Bakugo around. It was only recently Midoriya stopped following him. As he speaks, Aoyama gets louder. Now, Bakugo is the one tripping over himself to speak to Sunemura. He always looks at him. Say Dakirant. All for one wonders if staying out of his son's life was for the better. At least Tamura doesn't have heartbreaks. He's too invested in his video games. He seems happier though, la boss. Aoyama continues in his silence. He looks so sad, it make me sad. A portal appears. A figure shrouded in darkness and a fitted suit with piercing yellow eyes steps out first, followed by a smaller man in a hoodie, sweatpants, and primordial brand red shoes. His bluish hair hangs over his face. Sensei, Tamura greets, ignoring Aoyama, who's starting slinking away. I'm bored. I know you are, young Tamura, he replies. Maybe if you stop dusting your controllers, you would be able to play your games. Tamura clicks his tongue. I'm bored, he repeats. I'm sure Kurogiri can find something to entertain you, All for One says, reaching over to pat him on the head. Tamura freezes. Kurogiri freezes. Aoyama's eyes widen. All for One meets red eyes staring at him behind a curtain of blue. Is that all? He asks and Tamura nods, completely still with shock. Kurogiri opens a portal, Tamura steps through. All for One turns to Aoyama. Thank you for report. He waves him off and Aoyama walks through another open portal. All for One needs some alone time to think over what he's been told. Maybe the vault is a good idea. Yuga has no idea if Bakugo and Midoriya used to date. He has no idea why his boss wants to know so much about Midoriya in the first place. But he knows he can't refuse his orders. That doesn't mean he has to follow them. He was told to report on Midoriya. He can do that. But he doesn't need to tell All for One anything too important. Just enough to keep his interest peaked elsewhere and hopefully Midoriya won't be involved in any of his schemes. Thankfully, All for One seems interested in this boy's romantic life to not push on other information Yuga has gathered. Because Yuga was where Midoriya is. He was quirkless, useless and worthless. He has a quirk now, but it comes with a price. He doesn't want Midoriya to pay that price. Nor does he wasn't the boy, who doesn't insult him or his accent or his flamboyant ways, to become one of the mindless creatures he's briefly seen the doctor work on, a surprisingly good scare tactic. If Yuga can be his dramatic self, ranting about young love and heartbreak, maybe All for One won't be as interested in the boy. Maybe Midoriya won't become one of his pawns. Izuku stumbles into Stain again on one of his nightly patrols. Stain is surveying the skyline, scarf blowing in the breeze and swords glittering in the moonlight. Like this he looks dangerous. He looks like the man in the alleyway, Iida paralyzed and Izuku more than a little panicked. He looks like the man on the battlefield, red eyes focused on a paralyzed Iida as he starts to cut into flesh. So, when he spots Izuku and pulls one of his katanas from his sheath, Izuku starts counting his blessings. He barely kept up with Stain in a fight before and that's when he had a quirk. Can we not do this? He asks, desperately but Stain only lunges forward. Izuku charges up his gloves. He's been fiddling with his gear, taking inspiration from his friend's quirks and has decided to utilize Kaminari's. Flicks out one of his arm guard blades, yes, they were made with Himiko and Stain in mind, along with Aizawa and dodges by the skin of his teeth. Stain doesn't stop, nor does he slow, he simply tries again. Heart pounding and mouth dry, Izuku puts everything into not getting stabbed to death. Ducking under a swing, he darts close, slamming his fist into Stain's chest. Electricity jumps from his gloves to the man, and he jerks back. He swings again and Izuku lifts his arm, blocking his face. Metal meets metal in a harsh screech. Izuku doesn't wait for the next move. Stain isn't playing fair. He darts close, slices at any available skin and darts back. Something flashes in Stain's eyes and then he's swinging back. Atop a roof, bathed in darkness and moonlight, Izuku ducks and hits and slices. Stain keeps coming back, swinging, and punching when Izuku is close enough but his under armor is thankfully stopping any cuts. He really doesn't want to get paralyzed. The first time wasn't fun, and that's when he had Todoroki backing him. He sees an opening, a few minutes in, and throws himself forward, holding the blade up to Stain's throat, only to find a katana at his. They still, staring at each other. Izuku wonders if this is how he dies. And then Stain grins, a wide, grotesque grin. "You're fast," he comments. He doesn't even sound out of breath. "But you're not trained. Are you offering?" Izuku pants. Stain laughs, stepping back and sheathing his katana. "You want my help?" Izuku thinks of his answer and settles on nodding, flicking his wrist back so the blade disappears from view. "There are some people I need gone," he says, bluntly. "I can't take them on like this." Stain steps to the edge of the building. This time, every other night. With that, he jumps off the roof and disappears into the darkness. Hitoshi knows he's lucky with the life he now has. 2 dads who love him, a little sister he would die for, and multiple aunts and uncles that don't see him as villainous. They just see Hitoshi. It's rough for the first few days, awkward for the next couple of weeks, and then easy when months pass. Their family. Sometimes voices are raised, sometimes one of his dads gets hurt on patrol, sometimes he can't bring himself to talk for fear of his quirk. But it's surprisingly good. He has his own room he can decorate, all dark tones with purple lights and tapestries, the fluffiest blankets and pillows he can find, and a house that cares about him. He can keep his door closed. He can eat what he wants. There's no fear here. He wakes to Eri babbling at Hizashi as he cooks, tiny hands signing the words they've been trying to teach her. Shota is looking through a pile of paperwork, probably tests, red pen harsh against the white. Hitoshi walks over to the table, sidestepping Bastard and his big paws, and grabbing fish from his chair, holding the gray tabby to his chest. Sushi and her kittens should be hiding under the couch. Radio is probably guarding them. "You still want to train tonight?" Shota asks, eyeing Bastard as he flops up onto the counter. "Why wouldn't I?" Hitoshi asks. Nem is bringing over Gasuho and Khan is thinking introducing Toga would be best when you're all there. Hizashi explains, passing Eri her food first, then Hitoshi, then Shota, before grabbing his own plate. "Another foster kid?" Hitoshi asks. "Moro's again." Eri perks up and Shota nods. "Moro's?" she asks, smiling. "He's cool." Hitoshi smiles at her. Eri's obsession with the person didn't stop even when they had to tell her about how the bird men won't ever be coming back to hurt her. In fact, her obsession increased. Moro's is her favorite hero. Not that Hitoshi can disagree. Moro's is his hero, and his new cousins, and now, probably, his other new cousin. Takami. Hitoshi has no idea what Takami is when it comes to their family, but he's a part of it. Certainly loves the vigilante. "Sure," he says to Dad. "We'll say hi," which is how Hitoshi finds himself in a park with Eri on the swings, Gasuho pushing her and Toga Himiko nervously standing beside them. She's clearly unsure of what she's supposed to do, fearful and cautious. "Blood Quirk," Shota said. And Hitoshi gets it. God, does Hitoshi gets it. They'd been introduced, quick names, and then their foster parents had stepped away, watching but allowing them to meet without them listening in. Like introducing stray cats to one another. "Brainwashing," he says, and Gasuho pauses but continues pushing Eri. Toga blinks up at him. "What was that, Shinso-san?" "Brainwashing," Hitoshi repeats. "That's my quirk." Golden eyes widen. "Oh," she whispers. "Mustard gas," Gasuho says, looking away. Thanks to Recovery Girl, the worst of his injuries are no longer visible, but there's still a mark, not a scar, not too obvious, around his eye. Toga stares at him. "Eri," Hitoshi says, "can I tell Toga about the bird men? We'll step over there." Gasuho catches Eri on the next swing, holds her so she doesn't fall. Big, red eyes blink at Toga and then she nods, smiling. "Okay, Toshi." Hitoshi walks over to the fence. Toga is quick to follow. "Bird men?" she asks. "Yakuza," Hitoshi tells her, watches the way Toga's eyes widen dramatically, a small gasp from her lips. "Eri can. We think she can rewind. We don't want to push her. She thinks her quirk is a curse. But Moro's, he saved her from them." Toga's hands have started to shake. She still looks unsure, but there's understanding there now. We're all here because we're Ed up and Moro saved us, he says. I've been called villainous my whole life until I was dropped off on my dad's doorstep. This is your second chance. Toga nods, wipes at her eyes with the sleeves of her big sweater. Thank you, she says, and Hitoshi rolls his eyes. Telegraphing his movements, he slings an arm around her shoulders, touches so much easier when it isn't followed by pain, and tugs her over to the other two. She melts into his embrace. You're my cousin now, he says. Don't thank me for stating the obvious. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.